We're going to get started. Good morning and welcome to the Delta Stewardship Council meeting. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, August 27th, 2026. We're here at the Hilton Hotel in Stockton, California. My name is Julie Lee and I'm the chair of the Delta Stewardship Council. I'd like to invite the chair of the San Joaquin Board of County Supervisors, Sunny Dhaliwal, to come and share a few words with us. Chair Dhaliwal immigrated to the United States from a small village in Punjab, India, and built a career in public service rooted in his adopted home of San Joaquin County. After 30 years with the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, he and his wife settled in Lathrop, where he spent 6 years on the city council and 14 years as the mayor. He's the first Punjabi American to serve on the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors in the county's history. A longtime advocate for regional transportation, water resources, economic development, and the future of the Delta, Chair Dhaliwal is deeply committed to building a stronger and more connected San Joaquin County and region. Thank you so much for being with us, Chair Dhaliwal, and big thank you for Councilmember Eggman for helping coordinate this welcome. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to say welcome to my friend Sunny. We've served together almost since we were both elected around the exact same time, I think. Colleagues and allies, and Sunny has been a dedicated, steady leader during some of the hardest times. And as we know, Lathrop is centrally located in our Delta area. So I thank you, my friend, for coming today and giving us a welcome to the Stewardship Council to our community.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your kind words. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors, and as chair of the board, it's my pleasure to welcome the Delta Stewardship Council to Stockton and to San Joaquin County. The Delta is at the heart of our county. It's essential to our agriculture, our economy, our environment, and the communities we are proud to represent. We recognize that protecting the Delta requires collaboration. We need to balance our environmental stewardship with the needs of our farmers, businesses, residents, and communities that depend on the precious resource. As chairperson, I want to emphasize that San Joaquin County is committed to being a strong partner in that conversation. We may not always agree on every issue, but we share a responsibility to listen, work together, and find practical solutions that protect the Delta and the people who call this region home. That's why we are pleased that Senator McInerney's SB 872 is being taken seriously. The legislation offers practical solutions that recognize both the needs of the Delta and the broader needs of California's water delivery system. Its investment in California's core water infrastructure advances goals that I think we can all agree on: climate resilience, flood protection, water supply reliability, and protecting Californians from significant increases in water cost in the future. We believe California's water challenges require practical solutions and more than one solution. Thank you for choosing Stockton for this important gathering. On behalf of the Board of Supervisors and the people of San Joaquin County, welcome to our community. We look forward to a productive and meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. That was a wonderful, lovely welcome. All right, so next, Emma is going to explain how the public can participate in this meeting. Emma?
If any member of the public is interested in providing public comment on any agenda item during today's meeting, please send an email to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov as seen on the screen. Be sure to note a name and the agenda item you wish to speak on. When called, the clerk will unmute you.
Thanks, Emma. And in accordance with our Bagley-Keene requirements, we'll conduct a roll call of council members to establish a quorum. Emma, can you lead us in a roll call for the council members?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. I want to note that Councilmember Patterson will be absent for today's meeting, and Councilmember Miller is planning to attend and will make an announcement when she arrives.
Great.
Councilmember Burgess.
Here.
Councilmember Eggman. Councilmember Moranian.
Here.
Councilmember Zingali.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our public comments. This item is for the public to comment on any topic that is not on the council's agenda today. Any comments on items on the agenda will be taken during that item. Emma, do we have any public comments for items not on today's agenda?
We have no public comments online or in the room in Stockton. Councilmember Zingali.
No public comments in Eureka.
All right.
Thank you. Next up is our consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar today. The first is the adoption of the July 23rd, 2026 meeting summary. And the second is a consideration and approval of contract number DSC 261188 with the Regents of the University of California, San Diego, California Sea Grant for the 2028 class of Delta Science Fellows and the 2027, 28, and 29 classes of State Policy Fellows. Before we vote on these 2, I'll ask if there's any public comments on items on the consent calendar.
Through the chair, I do have a question. I missed the last meeting. Will I be able, is it okay for me to vote on the minutes?
Well, it depends on if you reviewed the meeting, if you feel comfortable, you can abstain from that vote if you don't feel that you have the base of knowledge to vote. I don't know if you watched the video or.
I didn't watch the video.
So, I would
So,
probably be
okay,
comfortable
I'll
to
be
abstain.
abstaining on that, so I don't know how you need to do that vote.
Okay, thank you.
But the vote right now is on consent calendar.
Yes, correct.
Correct.
Yeah, I move approval.
Okay, did we have any public comment on that?
We have no public comment in general on Zingali.
None here.
All right, no public comment.
And now I'll take a motion to approve these items. Okay. Thank you. Emma, let's proceed with a roll call vote, and please note for Diane's vote.
All right. Since Burgess abstains, I'll begin with Councilmember Eggman. Eggman, aye. Councilmember Morani.
Aye.
I'm only abstaining on the meeting summary. I
Correct.
am voting aye for item B,
Okay.
just to
For the
clarify.
motion that was just made.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
You should have seen Jorge's face.
He keeps us in line, doesn't he?
Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves.
We're not taking
we
it
can
together.
pull the-
They're two separate things.
We could pull the meeting minutes separate.
Okay, so do 2 separate votes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, let's do that.
Yes.
Okay, so let me start over then. So we're going to take these as separate votes. So the first item on the consent calendar is the adoption of the July 23rd, 2026 meeting summary. I'll entertain a motion to approve that one item. Okay, Councilmember Eggman moves. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Daniel.
All
right,
right.
Emma, let's do a
So
roll
for the
call vote
meeting
on that.
summary, Burgess will abstain.
How'd you
Council-
know? Yes.
Councilmember Eggman. Eggman, aye. Councilmember Moranian.
Aye.
Moranian, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Yes.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Lee, aye. The motion passes.
All right, and our second item on the consent calendar is the consideration of our contract with the University of California, San Diego, California Sea Grant, and the Delta Science Fellows, and the classes of State Policy Fellows. So do I have
Yeah, move approval.
a motion to approve? Okay, Councilmember Moranian, and second was
Burgess?
Diane Burgess. All right, let's do a roll call vote on that one, Emma.
Councilmember Burgess.
Yes.
Burgess, aye. Councilmember Eggman. Eggman, aye. Councilmember Moranian.
Aye.
Moranian, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Yes.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Lee, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, next up, we have the chair's report, and I'll just note that Councilmember Miller has joined us. thing to talk about is the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting preview. I'll welcome up Rachel Wigginton, our Special Assistant for Planning and Performance, to talk about our upcoming DPIIC meeting.
All right. Good morning, council members. My name is Rachel Wigginton. As Julie said, I'm the Special Assistant for Planning and Science for the council. So as you all know, the complex natural resource management issues faced by the Delta can only be addressed through sustained, coordinated scientific efforts. This is demonstrated clearly in the 2026 Delta Science Plan, which this council endorsed in May. And we aim to elevate this effort through our upcoming meeting of the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee. The next meeting of the Implementation Committee will take place on September 29th at the Safe Credit Union Convention Center in downtown Sacramento. It will be co-located with our Bay Delta Science Conference, though I'll note that we are sharing a venue with the conference, but its meeting attendees will not need to register for the conference in order to attend the public committee meeting. Chair Lee will lead the meeting, and one of the major agenda items is a presentation on the 2026 Delta Science Plan. We're hoping that by sharing a venue with the science conference, we can bring DPIIC leaders into direct contact with the people working to solve the Delta's persistent science and management challenges and encourage some fruitful interaction and learning. In addition to hearing about the Delta Science Plan, committee members will also hear 2 additional agenda items that spring from those 4 grand challenges to Delta Science that are laid out in the 2026 Delta Science Plan. First, members will hear about the council-led Delta Adapts Adaptation Plan and its implementation. The council endorsed the adaptation plan last year, but it has not yet been brought before the DPIIC in its final form. The presentation will underscore the leadership role of the DPIIC agencies for adaptation strategies that are within the plan, and also report out on the recent launch of the Delta Climate Adaptation Team in June. Last, the committee will hear an agenda item focused on interweaving traditional knowledge with Delta science. This agenda item will start with a report out on the Interweaving Roundtable series, similar to what you're going to be hearing from Dr. Dylan Chappell later in this meeting. For the DPIIC meeting, Dr. Chappell will be joined by representatives from the co-conveners of the series, which are the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and also the California Indian Environmental Alliance. The committee will then hear 2 examples from DPIIC member agencies about how they are actively working to interweave traditional knowledge in their work. First, we're going to hear from DWR about a recent cultural burn on one of their Delta-managed wetlands. And then this will be followed by a presentation from the State Water Board on their work to incorporate tribal beneficial uses into their water quality processes. We're excited about reconvening the full Interagency Implementation Committee after over a year, and we invite and welcome all of you to attend on the 29th. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Rachel. Do you have a question, Diane?
Not a question, but a comment. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. I'm so looking forward to this. I've been missing the DPIIC meetings. The last one was in April of 25.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so this is great. And I got a little preview of what was going on. And I'm also looking forward to, in the future, talking about the harmful algae blooms. And I know we're going to talk about that today, but there was so much work done with the DPIIC at that one meeting a couple of years ago.
In Stockton, yep.
I don't know, it was probably two years ago. But this is a really important meeting, and I love that everybody gets together and is all on the same, getting to spend that time to be really present, talking about the different things. So highlighting the science program is going to be great.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Rachel? All right, thanks, Rachel. The only other thing I wanted to mention was on August 18th, I attended the National Heritage Area Advisory Committee. We had a really interesting meeting about the new logo for the National Heritage Area. I think that ended up being forwarded to the DPC committee, correct?
It did. It went to the Delta Protection Commission.
Yeah.
I will just say I was a fan of the old logo, so I'm just going to still say that. But I think that what they've come up with is pretty. There were 2 options. I think that was forwarded over, and I think we all kind of agreed on the one that's more consistent with kind of that Art Deco that goes along with all the parks. I think it was the first one. But yeah, it'll be coming back to us at the next meeting. And
Great.
yeah, so good
That's fun.
stuff.
It was fun to get to participate in sort of that, and they gave them some feedback a couple of meetings ago, and so this was a meeting where we got to see how they changed logos. I think this is cool because I used to be a graphic artist way back in like my previous life before I even came to work for the state, so I was all very interested in what they did, and they did a great job on both of the options.
It's really neat because, there's so many ideas, and the beautiful thing is that a lot of us are coming from different experiences. Some of us have cultural kind of expertise. Others, it's about plants or water or, geography. And so when we all come together and we start talking about kind of the symbolism and what makes us what we are, we all get to contribute that. So
Correct,
it's really kind of a nice process.
Yeah, it's amazing how much thought goes into a logo. All right. Well, that's all I have. Do any other members have anything that they want to add to the chair's report? Nope. Okay. I'll ask if there's any public comments on this item.
There are no public comments online or in the room. Councilmember Zingali?
None here, thank you.
All right,
Thank
no
you.
public comment.
All right, next up is the executive officer's report, so I'll turn it over to Jessica Pearson.
Thank you. Good morning. Earlier this year, in May, the council endorsed and authorized the finalization of the 2026 Delta Science Plan, you may recall. So today we are excited to share that the final science plan is entitled Strengthening Science in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is now live and available online. After years of development and engagement with the Delta science community, it's a long-anticipated third iteration, which is intended to be kind of the how-to guide for how science is done and used in the region. The 2026 plan has 24 actions and 8 resources, and those are structured, as you may recall, around 4 grand challenges facing the Delta. So together, these principles and actions are supposed to form the basis for more forward-looking science in the community in the region. So we'll be sharing more about the new science plan at the Bay Delta Science Conference next month. And as Rachel just mentioned, a presentation to the Interagency Implementation Committee on September 29th with a potential request for committee action to support. The comment letters, we've got one on August 3rd. We sent a comment letter to Reclamation 341 regarding the San Joaquin Multi-Benefit Project on Sherman Island. The objectives of this project are to maintain levee integrity and provide long-term flood protection to Sherman Island, including rehabilitation of a portion of the landside levee. We meet the definition of a covered action. We invite 341 to engage staff in early consultation prior to submitting a certification of consistency with the Delta plan. We do have a recent covered action that's been filed on August 12th. Reclamation District 38 submitted a certification of consistency for the McCullum River Confluence Multi-Benefit Project. This levee project would include a waterside habitat bench. This is at the confluence of the North and South Moke Rivers on Staten Island. The certification is available for public review on our Covered Actions portal, and the 30-day public review period concludes on September 11th at 5 p.m. We are also in receipt of 3 appeals on the Department of Water Resources Delta Conveyance Project Certification of Consistency. Those appeals were filed prior to the August 24th deadline. The hearing for these appeals will be held within 60 days of that deadline, and the council will issue a notice of hearing setting that exact date as early as next week. So another reminder that the council has a Delta Conveyance Project webpage under the Covered Actions tab on our website. This provides the public access to the certification of consistency and all of the appeals documents. So the information on that website includes a box link that contains the certification record as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Chief Counsel Jorge Aguilar with information on ex parte communication restrictions associated with those appeals and any additional information on this topic. Jorge?
Council members, the council's regulations governing appeals of certification of consistency require that I remind the council of the ex parte communication restriction at this meeting. The ex parte communication restriction is a requirement of California's Administrative Procedure Act and the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 5024. The regulation prohibits any communication, direct or indirect, regarding any issue in the proceeding to the council or council members from an employee or representative of an agency that is a party or from an interested person outside of the agency without notice and an opportunity for all parties to participate in the communication. What that means here is council members and council staff cannot and should not communicate about or discuss the Delta Conveyance Project Revised Certification of Consistency or the issues raised in the appeals proceedings with any person outside of the council. The only exception is communications regarding the administrative or procedural status of the proceedings. We have established a special email address to receive those types of communications. 2025 Delta Conveyance at deltacouncil.ca.gov. I strongly recommend that if the Delta Conveyance Project Revised Certification of Consistency and/or the related appeals proceedings become a topic of conversation, please excuse yourself from the meeting immediately by explaining you're under an ex parte communication prohibition and cannot discuss or hear any extra record information about the project. If you receive a request from someone other than a council employee to discuss the Delta Conveyance Project Revised Certification of Consistency or the council's appeals proceedings, please decline that request and make Executive Officer Jessica Pearson and I aware of that request so we can handle it appropriately. Any ex parte communications will be shared with the parties via our service list. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the ex parte communication restriction at this time.
Does anyone have questions? Yes, Diane.
One of the issues that is part of the, part of what we're dealing with is actually in the news quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
There have been presentations coming my way, not related to specifically the conveyance project, but related to a topic that is being discussed. I'm trying not to even say what it is, but am I supposed to avoid those meetings as well? I'm trying to, as you well know,
Sure.
I try very hard to preserve my position so that I can serve appropriately, but it's in the news, it's locally in my community, and there are presentations that have come to me through the other boards, commissions, committees that I sit on. So how am I supposed to handle that?
Sure, and I think I understand what you're asking about. So the ex parte communication restriction doesn't require council members to, put their head in the sand and not understand what's going on around them. Each of these council members, as council members, you have duties and obligations, whether albeit to constituents or others. And information of general public, I don't know, perhaps like about a species or something that is just a general topic is not something that you don't have to kind of refrain from understanding. What really covers are the issues that are in play in the proceedings. We are providing you a copy of the appeals. As you know, you get briefings. So it's the matters that are at issue before us that really you have to be be extra careful about, as opposed to whether it's it could be something like, let's say there was a weather issue and it's just something that pertains to the state, and you can still, hear about it, you can understand it. But when it becomes specific to the project here or it becomes specific to the issues that are in front of us, that's when you have to be careful about trying to make sure, because the idea is that the decision of the council, the decision of the council is going to be based on the information that is part of the proceeding, so it's not extra record information.
Well, I believe communication is not just what comes out of your mouth, but what you're also listening to. And so that's why I'm trying to be really careful.
Does that help at all? I mean,
it does, but I'll just say.
And I could also, what I also recommend is if you're not sure, I'm always at your beck and call, so you can always reach out to me directly.
Sometimes I'm going to just run into that wall where I'm going to see it and I'm going to have to step away. But I just want to say it is all over in my world, one of those topics. So I'm going to try to avoid it, but I will say sometimes I don't have control over how it comes through.
And just another kind of an important caveat is the ex parte restriction concerns interested parties and parties to the proceeding. So people who are discussing the revised certification of consistency with the Delta Conveyance Project. So a general scientific topic may not be covered by that.
Thank you.
Okay. And just a reminder to the public for everything covered actions, if you want to get notifications, please go to our website and subscribe to receive our announcements. There's a subscribe button at the bottom of our homepage, or you can just email engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov and request to join that listserv. In your packet this month are outreach highlights reports and an active projects list. Career opportunities and milestone accomplishments were our strongest performing content across all of our communications channels. This included our LinkedIn post inviting applications for our Deputy Executive Officer for Science position. And on Facebook, our most liked post promoted the release of a new report, which you have a copy of in front of you, the 15 Years of Progress, Rising to the Challenge of the Delta Reform Act. This was a report developed in partnership with the Council, the Conservancy, and the Delta Protection Commission. It highlights key accomplishments over the last 15 years since the Delta Reform Act was passed, and all the partnerships that we are engaged in to help shape the Delta's future, and also outlines the work that remains. So you'll be hearing more about this report during our legislative update. Our top email announcement this month also promoted the release of that progress report. It's going to be an important tool as well in our meetings and as we seek to educate legislative staff, for example, and others who are interested in our work. So with that, I'm going to invite Audrey Cho to the panel table to give us our legislative update, and she's also going to touch upon the progress report.
Good morning, Chair Lee and council members. We are rapidly approaching the end of legislative session, which is Monday, August 31st. August 31st is the last day for the legislature to pass bills, and then the governor has until September 30th to consider bills, that is to sign or veto those bills. As I noted last month, while the governor's budget was signed at the end of June, discussions around Proposition 4 and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund were deferred to this month. On August 20th, Senate budget leaders introduced a GGRF, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, spending plan, which would supposedly help to backfill declines in revenue from the state's Cap and Invest program and continue funding certain clean drinking water, public transit, and other legislative priorities. This trailer bill is not yet in print. Similarly, a trailer bill is not yet in print regarding final Proposition 4 allocations, but we have a specific interest in understanding where allocations for Delta levies lie. Any additional trailer bills must be in print by Friday evening in order to be voted on then by Monday. You are all very familiar with SB 872 by Senator McNerney. This would create the Delta Levies and Canal Subsidence Fund and allow for distribution of funds to address those two purposes, canal subsidence along the State Water Project and then Delta levies. The bill creates a working group process led by the Delta Conservancy to develop a list of priority projects for 15% of any levy funding allocated to the fund for that purpose. Amendments taken in the Assembly Appropriations Committee require that this list of projects be consistent with the Delta levies investment strategy. So the bill now requires D-list consistency for any funding directed towards the levies portion of the bill. That's 85% in the discretionary authority of the Department of Water Resources, and then 15% in the discretionary authority of the Conservancy through their priority projects list. This bill is awaiting the governor's final decision. Shifting gears to a bill you haven't heard about yet, SB 599 by Senator Caballero aims to address forecasting needs amid the growing intensity and frequency of atmospheric rivers and associated flooding. So specifically, the bill directs the Department of Water Resources to build upon existing efforts to integrate forecast-informed reservoir operations, or FIRO, by researching, developing, and implementing experimental tools that produce longer-term forecasts, so 2 to 6 weeks ahead or 1 to 6 months ahead. This bill is also with the governor for his consideration. AB 2218 by Assemblymember Kalra would declare it California's policy to recognize and address water-related inequities inflicted upon California Native American tribes. Should there be concerns with state agency implementation of the bill, the language outlines a mediation and resolution process through the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs. The bill passed through Assembly concurrence yesterday and will be headed to the Governor's desk for consideration. Lastly, AB 2216 by Assemblymember Aguiar Curry would have expanded the Delta Conservancy to encompass the full county boundaries of Yolo, Sacramento, Solano, San Joaquin, and Lake counties outside of the legal Delta and Suisun Marsh. This bill did not make it off of the Senate Appropriations suspense file on August 13th and will not be moving forward. So I've presented previously on Senator Padilla's S3738 More Water Act, but I'm here to share that the bill advanced out of the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources on July 29th. This bill would reauthorize existing programs that help support development of recycled water projects, reauthorize a program for floodplain habitat restoration in the Sacramento River and its tributaries, and create a new federal grant program for water delivery system repairs along the California Aqueduct. In a similar vein, S1413 by Mr. Padilla would raise the cap on federal appropriations for the San Joaquin River Restoration Settlement Act and for Friant Division Central Valley Project canal improvements, highlighting the importance of supporting ecological restoration and mitigating water supply losses for Friant Division farmers. This bill was also reported favorably out of the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So before leaving for recess, the U.S. House passed a short-term funding measure that would put off government funding decisions until December 4th. Senators passed a separate bill with bipartisan support that would extend current government funding levels until December 11th. One caveat with the Senate bill is that it includes a provision that would block until December the finalization of the Office of Management and Budget's proposed grant-making rule that I've presented on previously. As a reminder, this proposed rule would revise how federal agencies review and award grants, requiring political appointees sign-off of those grants and stating that peer review serves only an advisory purpose. So ideally, these stopgap measures would help us avoid a federal shutdown that we were experiencing last year. We'll know more about the fate of these measures when the House and the Senate return on August 31st and September 14th, respectively. I'd like to close by directing your attention to 15 Years of Progress, Rising to the Challenge of the Delta Reform Act, which you have in front of you. The document is also accessible through the QR code on screen and the Council's website. This collaborative document reflects accomplishments since the passage of the Delta Reform Act across the 3 Delta agencies. It was really intended to be a short and accessible summary of how the 3 agencies have worked together to further the co-equal goals, predominantly for a legislative audience. One of the most frequent questions that we receive as staff is about how the scope and work of the 3 agencies differ, and so we're hopeful that this document helps to answer that question. Once session is over, I'm looking forward to distributing copies to our partners in the legislature and spreading the word about the progress so far and how the Council and its partners work to improve Delta governance, collaboration, and coordination. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is a beautiful document, by the way. Very, very well done.
Thank you to our comms team for their support,
Yeah,
really.
it turned out beautiful. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay.
All right.
Good report. Thanks, Audrey. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. I'm going to end with a look ahead to the rest of today's agenda. Our Delta lead scientist, Dr. Wyndham Myers, is on vacation, so look forward to her next report in September. Up next, we are going to hear an update from Delta Watermaster Jay Ziegler on current water and Delta CHABS reporting, harmful algal blooms. He's also going to talk about an update to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan and other activities related to implementation of the Delta Plan. Then we will hear from a panel of experts from USGS, Department of Water Resources, and the State Water Board, who are going to provide a more in-depth presentation on implementation of our harmful algal blooms monitoring strategy, which the Council played a leadership role in developing. Also talking about the history of that issue, goals, recent progress, and next steps. And then to close out the meeting, we are going to hear from Council staff on the recent 2026 Interweaving Traditional Knowledge Roundtable Series, hosted by the Council, as you heard earlier, in partnership with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and the California Indian Environmental Alliance. Happy to take any questions, otherwise I'll conclude my report.
Yes, Councilmember Miller has a question, but Maggie, you may want to listen to this, because I know Lisa Marie isn't here, but
Yeah.
it's about the by the numbers.
It is. It's maybe for Lisa Marie. Oh, sorry. So it's for Lisa Marie and Maggie. Just maybe 2 questions on this. If next time, the water temperature piece, I think is relatively new. I'm just really curious, like these seem higher than normal, so I'm I would just love to learn more about then what happens, just because I don't know. And then the second question, and I'm sorry if this isn't fully relevant, but with all the news on the Colorado River, would it be possible on this, by the numbers or some subsequent report, just to understand how that the Delta and the Colorado River come together in terms of understanding the storage and all the issues? Not for today, just for future meetings. Is that okay, Madam
We can
Chair?
ask Dr. Wyndham Myers to address both those issues
Okay.
at our next report.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. Anything else, Jessica?
That's it.
All right. Before we move on, I'll ask if there's any public comments on this item.
Yes, we have a public comment in the room from Adam Borchardt with the California Central Valley Flood Control Association.
Good morning, Chair Lee and council members. My name is Adam Borchardt. I'm speaking today on behalf of the California Central Valley Flood Control Association and its public agency members, including about...
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm having trouble hearing the speaker here.
We're working on it.
We're fixing it, Daniel.
Is that better? All right. All right. Good morning, Chair and council members. My name is Adam Borchardt. I'm speaking today on behalf of the California Central Valley Flood Control Association, including its public members and 40 reclamation districts in the Delta regarding Agenda Item 6, a legislative update specifically on SB 872 by Senator McNerney that would establish the Delta Levees and Canal Subsidence Fund. As introduced, the bill would have provided a much-needed infusion of state investment to support levee infrastructure in the Delta in a 50-50 split with addressing subsidence impacts to the aqueduct. The association was supportive of the senator's intent and his bill as it was introduced. However, as the bill journeyed through the legislative process, subsequent amendments to the bill, as well as a stripping of the originally proposed funding, has made SB 872 unpalatable to the association's Delta Reclamation District members, the primary beneficiaries of any Delta levy investments by the state, to the extent that the association unfortunately is now requesting the governor to veto the bill. We have shared our veto letter and concerns with council staff. Our veto letter is focused on three main concerns. SB 872 threatens to upend a half century of success. SB 872 creates a new program outside the Delta, outside of the state budget process, and 872 creates unnecessary bureaucracy. Currently, Delta Reclamation District partners, or Delta Reclamation Districts partner with the California Department of Water Resources in two statutory funding programs: the Delta Levees Maintenance Subventions Program, which was established in 1973, and the Delta Levees Special Flood Control Projects, which was established in 1988. With their creation of the proposed SB 872 fund, it is unclear how the subventions and special projects funding programs would continue in their current structure. In the final text passed out of the state legislature, SB 872 would grant complete discretion to the Secretary of Natural Resources to allocate and expend monies in the fund, with the undefined parameter of need and seismic risk being two guideposts. There's also no guarantee on an equitable funding split with addressing subsidence impacts to the California aqueduct. The proposed 100% state cost share on its face in the bill would seem to be beneficial to Delta Reclamation Districts, but by making it mandatory without consideration for the size of the project to be reimbursed by the state could unintentionally result in reclamation districts not participating in the program in the future. Additionally, the inclusion of a requirement that 15% of the fund that is allocated to the Delta Conservancy shall be consistent with the Delta Levees investment strategy is redundant. As the council knows, DWR must comply with DLIS and provide an annual report. It is not clear how the 15% carve-out for the Conservancy would provide any demonstrable improvements to funding Delta levees. Again, we've shared our concerns in our veto letter with staff and happy to take any questions and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. All right. Any other public comments, Emma?
No further requests online or in the room. Councilmember Zingali.
None here, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next up, we have our Delta Watermaster update. So I'll welcome Jay Miller.
Chair Lee, members, it's great to be with you today, especially to see an old friend, Susan Eggman. Senator Eggman, great to have you in this body now to help give us guidance on decision-making in the Delta. So look forward to further communication with you and all of that. Let's see, I think it's my... Oh, sorry. Let me jump in here. I think I'm really interested in sharing some unique hydrology conditions in the Delta that we've already seen in this water year. We're going to kind of preview where we're headed in Delta water reporting, as well as review reporting from 25, and address channel maintenance, golden mussels, and harmful algal blooms, and I'd like to also just look back a bit at the last 15 years and a sense of where we are in the activities of the Delta Watermaster and intersect with. Okay, yes, right. Thank you. Right. So in particular, the U.S. Geological Survey declared this March, the March Parch. We saw unprecedented high temperatures for sustained periods of time in the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys. That really put pressure on farmers throughout the watershed to keep their crops viable and begin watering earlier in the year. We also saw something of a perfect storm for diverters along Middle River, diverters in the South Delta, who began to experience water accessibility issues as early as March and April. Those were alleviated a bit when the temporary barriers were installed along Grant Line Canal, Middle River, and Old River. But then later in June, we began to see some delivery problems again, or some accessibility problems in the Delta. So we are involved in a very active line of communication with Pescadero Irrigation District in the South Delta, looking at the need for channel maintenance in areas of the South Delta. We have begun some new modeling efforts, and the Department of Water Resources worked actively with South Delta Water Agency to get recent bathymetry data to give us a better sense of water levels and how things have changed since water year 22, which was our last official drought year. So looking forward to kind of integrating all of that data together. I'd like you to kind of look at this through a diverter's eyes. If you look at the chart at the bottom right in the slide that's provided here, the elevation levels are relative to sea level. When elevation levels are between 4 and 6 feet above sea level, generally we don't see any problem with in-delta diversion, but below that we do. And this is what you see here is a slide from when you look at the 2-week period from March 15th to April 1, when we received a number of complaints from in-delta diverters, again along Middle River, Old River, and Pescadero Irrigation District when their pumps were cavitating. Also, Byron Bethany Irrigation District had substantial pump cavitation during that period. So that's pretty much unheard of in the Delta. We have seen this problem on a recurrent basis in July and August, but not this early in the year. So I think it just underscores the need for active channel maintenance activity. Again, the installation of the barriers, which begins in May and is generally completed by late June, was beneficial to the water level issues. Department of Water Resources was particularly responsive in raising the Middle River barrier by an additional foot, which regulations allow, which enhanced the ability and accessibility of farmers to get water in that period. So we've been moving forward on a number of fronts. The department also conducted a public workshop a week and a half ago in Tracy, and looking at the permanent operable gates in the South Delta, which would provide an ability to more actively manage water level conditions for multiple benefits, water quality, water accessibility, and in sync with project operations. And it was good to see that the Bureau of Reclamation was present for that meeting, but we are seeing worrisome signs about the Bureau's ability to fund these critical dual project improvements in the Delta. So I think that's something that both the State Board and the Council need to watch for future actions. Turning to water reporting, our in-Delta experiment with the Delta Alternative Compliance Plans continues forward, now integrated fully in the Cal Water system. As we've reported previously, for water years 23 and 24, we achieved almost 99% reporting compliance. The integration into the new Cal Waters database at the State Board, we're just about there now. We're at about 97% compliance, and we are sending failure to file letters for to diverters that have not yet filed for water year 25. And I just again want to underscore that the use of OpenET is really an indicator of consumptive use, and so it measures effectively both diversion and seepage together, and so it's provided to look across the Delta that you can't the rest of California and identify a specific place of use or with a point of diversion in where water is diverted and then applied on the ground, and yielding us information on how much is actually used in that space. This has been a great true-up tool in better understanding not just overall consumptive use in the Delta and water use by agricultural diverters, but also to help us understand where we might be missing something in the Delta. So it's an accessible database that really gives us a great understanding of localized and Delta-wide consumptive use, and something which all of us can essentially measure how we're performing in thinking about water use and irrigation and conservation actions that may happen in a drought year. I want to underscore that we do, the State Board did update the Senate Bill 88 water use reporting regulations in December 2025. Those measurements do require expressly for measurement diversions a specific interval for large diverters, those diverting at rates of 30 CFS, cubic feet per second, or 10,000 acre feet per year, to report to the State Board on at least a weekly basis and to kind of understand those intervals at 15-minute intervals. So in response to this, we've begun to reach out to the in-Delta diverters. I'm going to go back to the last slide and just kind of give you a sense of this mosaic of 1,700 points of actual measurement across the legal Delta, and to understand that if you look at this map, what we have discerned is that about a third of the Delta water users, let me say that differently, about 40 diverters comprise 1/3 of total diversion in the Delta. And so those are the folks that we're meeting with to say, well, what kind of methodology makes the most sense for you in reporting, recognizing that almost every Delta island has unique diversion circumstances and considerations. What you're looking at now is RD 2068 in the Cache Slough Basin, and they have developed a Channel Master sonar system, an ADCP measurement methodology in channel to actually discern what their rate of diversion is off of their main channel, and that has been registered within 2 to 3% accuracy. And so that's their unique solution. It's not, our office is not, I am not applying a universal standard to what measurement should look like. We're trying to meet with Adam Borchard and other folks in the North Delta, folks throughout the Delta, Pescadero and other places, to really talk about what kind of measurement approach makes the most sense for their system. And we are also beginning to undertake a couple of contracts out of the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium, which Michael George began convening in 2017, and which we continue to use as our advisory forum, including water experts, farmers, water attorneys, everybody system in a meaningful way to advise us about what the best measurement methodology is. And so we've also asked the UC Ag and Natural Resources Program, University of California, to help us look at the data that we're getting from various measurement experiences and experiments around the legal delta, and help us reconcile what's the most reliable measurement, how do we make these different data sets talk to each other, how do we understand them better together, and what are our gaps in information here. And similarly, we're working with the OpenET folks to think about if we really begin to push the envelope on this satellite-driven data to analyze consumptive use, could we get to a 24-hour time step on the ET or consumptive use data that we can create a local correlative formula or model for that then gives us predictive diversion levels. So we're trying to kind of integrate all of this data into a more uniform system of measurement that everyone can learn from and have this as accessible as we can. And I think pursuing this proposition that, again, my predecessor, Michael George, really began, that we can, through better data, we'll advance better understanding and we'll get to better water management solutions to achieve all public benefits of water. So it's really predicated on this idea that better data will equal a more peaceful, more harmonious understanding of the needs of the state and federal projects, as well as the in-delta diverters, as well as the needs of our ecological objectives in the system for fisheries. So we're very excited about that effort.
Will you take a question now?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead, Gail.
Thank you, Jay. I'm always surprised at kind of the differences in how people say, like, what is better data? Like, I really am struggling with this, especially like the best available science. Just, am I busted for saying that? But I really, so when you say like better data, who agrees on that? And how do we set, like, one of the best things I think we do on the council is our science program and creating this open source so we can come to agreement so that we do just have this empirical measurement, but I struggle with it. So do you have any feedback? And
Sure.
Do you understand the question? I know it's
yeah,
a little
no, that's
bit...
a great question. I mean, I think candidly, the reason we're now 9 years into the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium is to try to evoke that consensus from diverse parties, whether your perspective is looking at delta diversions from the state and federal projects, whether your perspective is as a modeler, which we particularly value because the data ultimately needs to be aligned so that we all have an understanding of different flow conditions and how those intersect with diversion. And so I think, honestly, we're using this forum to drive that idea of best science and how do we align this consumptive use index that we're getting on applied water and seepage with real-time diversion information. And we're getting closer and closer. There's better the data that we have from Metropolitan is probably the most informative, if you will, in terms of where we see agreement and disagreement on the remote sensing data versus actual diversion data. And so we're really digging in. This is the first year that Metropolitan will have all 55 of their siphons for their 4 islands in recording data in the system and in their system. So in terms of reliability, feasibility of getting that data, integration of the data, we're really using all of these experiments around the Delta to kind of drive this point of, like, where do we see the best? Where do we see agreement? Where do we see disagreement? What do we do about that? And candidly, we turn to University of California Ag and Natural Resources on this study Because I think you all, even the state board, needs to hear from an independent source to your question, not from me as a water regulator, not from the council, with all due respect, not from the state board, but rather, how are we doing from an independent set of hydrologic experts with incredible bona fides in the Delta? And so, long and short, we'll have a better answer to your question next year, because we've really asked UCANR effectively to audit how we're doing in getting data from different sources and getting to a point of alignment where we can talk about that data in a way that we have a common understanding, regardless of where you're sitting looking at that data.
Yeah, maybe just one follow-up on that. Is there anything more we could do as a council to be more helpful on that?
Well, we have 2 additional proposals that we are working with OpenET, the independent nonprofit that we're sourcing the satellite consumptive use data from. And I've been in open conversations with Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers, Dr. Myers, and so we're talking about how we might advance some of these other studies that maybe give us a better window in, if we're in a drought, how do we apply the right conservation tools in the right places to actually improve net delta flows? And we certainly learned from the Delta Drought Response pilot project that we shouldn't be just throwing that money everywhere. There are places where we can do this better, measure it better, and get better outcomes with respect to the goal of achieving in delta flows. So that's one study, which is kind of I'd say the conservation metrics angle in this. A second study that we're looking at is toward that other objective that I talked about in being able to use the satellite data to get to a 24-hour consumptive use index for the Staten Island, say, in the Central Delta, and then be able to look to interpret and run a model, if you will, to tell us what the diversion levels are in the same period of time. And then I think we actually have full integration of all of the data sets. So thank you for that question. We are in active discussions with the Delta Science Program as we look at some of these, candidly, have really been shaped by all the participants in the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. And I hope you'll just, let us know if there's something more we can do to be helpful or to move it forward. I do think this is the way we can just give back to the Delta if we really can coalesce around some of these metrics. At least we're all operating from the same understanding. So
yeah.
Whatever, I think, at least speaking for myself, we can do to be helpful,
yeah.
I would.
No, I so appreciate that because I think we are all moving the same direction. And again, I'll give Michael George the credit for getting this forum started. It's an ad hoc advisory committee, but it's really invaluable because you have the full spectrum of interests at the table and a great group of hydrologic scientists from Scripps, from across the spectrum. So and from Scripps to my local farmers in the Delta. So it's just been a really great forum to help us inform paths forward here.
Well,
so
you deserve a lot of credit for moving it forward, Jay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we'll give credit to Michael George and you.
Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you on it because I think we're definitely getting to a good place in identifying our gaps and seeking to fill them with, really best-in-class science. So appreciate those questions.
Councilmember Morandian has a question, and then I think we'll just go around there.
I have a question on an earlier slide when you discussed water quality, South Delta water level, water quality. And then there's like 2 major topics. One is temporary ag barriers. I understand that. And then the second one is permanent operable gates project, where you talk about South Delta improvement. And can you shed some light on that? Is this stuff that has been already done, is being done? Where is it in the process? And when it says potential to improve circulation and water quality, I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Sure. So we've been talking about permanent operable gates for a long time.
Yeah.
So almost 20 years.
Yeah,
and,
it's not there.
But
because there's a minute that, there's a gate there. I haven't seen. I went to the South Delta.
Yeah. Well, 2 years ago, I would say this had a lot of momentum. As we were coming out of the drought, I think people were looking to expedite tools that we could address water levels in a way that we could also accommodate operating the pumps in a way that didn't impact water yield and at the same time protected water quality and accessibility in the Delta. And so I will give DWR all the credit. They are shouldering forward with this project. They have a modeling workshop later this month on the 26th. Happy to send the council information on that forum because I think it's really important to understand the alignment of the objectives that they're seeking to manage to and the modeling that they have done so far. They expect to be in the project review permitting phase really 2026 to 28. And then hopefully that the permanent operable gates would be constructed by 2030. So that's a rough timetable of what they're looking at. What I will say is this is a 50-50 project between the Central Valley project and the State Water project. And the Bureau has yet to make financial commitments to the project. So I think, from the perspective of the CVP customers, the State Water Project customers, I give the state project an A, and I give the CVP at best a incomplete here because we're not getting the level of engagement that candidly is going to be necessary to deliver that project.
And it's a standalone project, standalone funding.
It is.
It has nothing to do with the
right. And the gates, so there are 3 gates in the system. There's one on Grant Line, there's one on Old River, and there's another on Middle River. And they, I can show you the picture of the, if I go back to it here, what it actually, sorry about that. So this is what the gate, this is what the permanent, this is what the seasonal gates look like on Middle River. You can see it's effectively a stone barrier, and it mitigates the interaction of the tides to trap water behind it, which is when South Delta diverters are really accessing this water. So that's at higher levels. So this is what it looks like as we think about these gates today. There's a construction window. We're as soon as we hit the end of September, all of these are pulled out with a large backhoe and just we rip it out, and then they're put back in each year in May. And to address the water level issues.
And then you won't do this if the gate is there.
Exactly. So the permanent gates are designed to be mechanically operated in a way that we can look at water quality conditions, water level issues, consideration of how the pumps are operating, and integrate those objectives better.
So if you do a life cycle analysis, the cost of this over so many years versus, the mechanical gate, you can somehow justify the funding of it?
Right.
So
I think DWR is still pulling
than
that data together, but that's a great question, and I'm happy to get back to you on what that analysis shows.
that would be very interesting because then you know that it's has a better chance of being program. South Delta, the 2 bullets are part of that. I mean, this gate is a part of that improvement,
right?
Or that's a separate plan.
No, that's a critical part of it. The other part of it, it also sometimes referred to as the Water Level Response Plan of 2005, underscores the need for active channel maintenance, and that's dredging. And we've identified a number of problem areas in the Delta. We have a working group pursuant to the memorandum of understanding that we've initiated with state and federal and local agencies earlier this year. And so we're continuing to kind of work together to identify problems, policy, permitting, and funding solutions. And so I think you'll certainly be hearing more about this. There's really just a critical need to actively manage these channels.
Thank you.
So that's the other part.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hang on just a minute, Diana. I want to double check with Daniel. Did you have your hand up, Councilmember Zingali?
I did, yes, but go ahead, Diane.
Okay, thank you. I will probably have more questions at the end of your presentation, but thank you for letting us kind of interrupt you in the middle of it. But one comment was on the best available science. It feels like, and I'm using the word feel, that there's been such an effort to create an agreement on what that is. And I feel, and I think, that there's also an effort to undermine that, because some folks don't like the data that's being, that's the what's going on. And so I think it's really important for us in the role that we're in to really not allow that to happen, to continue to collect that data and to continually work together to make sure we do have the best available science wherever we are in different things, and you talked about that. The other thing I was going to say about the gates is that there was seasons, there was kind of a predictability of water at a certain time, and because of sea level rise, because of all of the changes in our weather patterns, because of the snowpack not being there, having those gates and having the flexibility to respond and be able to pivot a little bit faster is also very, very good, because we may have these kind of drastic situations in the future that make it really valuable to be able to, for us to respond rather than spend a couple weeks getting the rocks out and all. We may not even be able to calculate the value of that at this point.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think it's important to think about how far we've come on this issue. I mean, thinking about the debates that were in 2009 about how much water is being consumed in the Delta. And then some would argue, oh, well, we need meters on every ag siphon. It's like, well, how are you going to do that? So, and what was the science we were using back then? It was a guy driving his truck around Delta Islands to see what crops were being grown, and then estimating based on the crops and the acreage of crops how much water was being consumed. So I think now the fact that we're arguing about like how to refine the satellite information we're using to make these estimates is progress.
And I think one of the things Jay said too was we're learning from what we're learning. So the more information that we're gathering, we're realizing there's something else that we need to be understanding as well. So it's a great exercise.
Thank you. All right, Daniel, did you have a question?
I did, and it's kind of building on Diane and Gail's questions to Jay. And I'm putting this question to you because I've known you for decades, and I know you're a big thinker. And this is what came up in my mind when you were talking about better data. Kind of the core assumption is better data equals better policy. And I think Jessica's right. There are reasons to be optimistic about that here in California, but in the contextual reality that we work in and live in, you mentioned MOUs with the federal agencies. There's this great irony, I know you're aware of, where we live in this age of intelligence, where our capacity for data, to consolidate data, and have the best data doesn't result in rational policy in so many cases. In fact, as Diane said, there's kind of a willful resistance to that. The most graphic evidence for me in the last 24 hours is that a glacier literally collapsed in Nepal, caused this major disaster there ongoing, that I doubt will result in any policy change, even though it's another big data point. So I know you've probably thought about these questions of how do we operate in that larger context? How do we either try to better influence that context so that policy mirrors the best available science, or do we need a strategy here in California for how we navigate that and just recognize that's the state of the world? So big question, but again, I know you're a big thinker and you probably thought about these things too.
I think the way I would respond to that is you'll recall that I began flagging the issue of the non-performance of the federal gauging system. So there's a 55 gauge architecture measuring water quality factors across the legal delta. The Bureau is responsible for the way this has worked is that DWR takes half, the Bureau takes half, and the Bureau's monitoring system, but for the 2 regulatory gauges that they are required to monitor, which they have effectively administered, there were 25 of the gauges went down for a number of months. And they were collecting, most were collecting information. We're still reviewing that data. Even today, as you look at baydeltalive.com, if we were to look back a year and a half ago, that system did have 55 gauges reporting in real time, and now that number of gauges that are operating in real time is about 30 to 35. And so the accessibility of that information to the public, to the science community, to everybody that cares about meeting water quality standards and other, as an indicator of meeting the beneficial needs of water, isn't what it used to be. And I think that should be a matter of concern. And I think as a Californian, I think this does redouble the importance of having control of the science program from an investment and policy regulatory innovation perspective. And so I think your question suggests where I would take you is that we have to do this on our own. It's not inexpensive, but it's not expensive. And the idea of operating with less science, less monitoring, and in an era where each hydrologic year has greater complexity is insanity. So I do believe that the state board and the council share an interest in developing a more robust base of funding and measurable science objectives for all performance areas in the Delta. And I'm going to touch on this briefly, but I do appreciate the question. But as we look back in the Delta, we continue to see this balkanization of science. And it's generally, the science that I want as if I'm a local diverter is many cases the same as what the state and federal projects would want, but there are important differences as well. And we need to look at all of the data together in a more open and transparent way. And I think really that would, what you're asking of me, the response would be that we need a greater level of investment from the state of California, given the uncertainty of what we have seen from our federal partners in the last year and a half.
Thanks, Jay. I think you make an important point, which is one of the ways that there's a willful resistance to having policy follow good science is just by undermining the availability of good science. And that's a big part of what you're addressing here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, anyone else? Susan?
If I could, thank you, Jay, and Daniel's trying to give you massive questions, huge, right? Because that it is, right? It's the world we're living in. We just saw what happened in Nepal. The Colorado River, right, is struggling at the same time. And here we are trying to manage the Delta, which is really important. But I just want to, as someone who's also been around this since the early 2000s, we have come so far, and just having some agreement on this kind of open plan that we can all look at the same data and agree, I think is tremendous. And as far as backing up for the federal government, we're having to do that on healthcare and everything else, right? So it's not just this, but California, like all other things, if we can do this right, it ripples across. Because we can only carry so much weight ourselves, but we have so much smarter science now. With satellites, with AI being able to do big compilations of data, it feels more hopeful than it's felt to me in a while. So thank you.
All right, feel free to continue, Jay.
Okay.
Remember where you were?
Page 11.
There we are. Let's see, I took things backwards then. I'm going to just flag a few issues that I know the council is paying active attention to and that are also areas of active communication between our office and the Delta Science. Everywhere, Sacramento, every Delta county now has a declared state of emergency. I think we have reached a point where the proliferation of golden mussels has really, we now have to think about what is our treatment and containment strategy, not just our identification and prevention strategy, because we're seeing them everywhere in the Delta now. The furthest north now being the Port of West Sacramento. This is an issue of huge concern across the Delta. I'm particularly interested in some of the experiments that water agencies are undertaking around the Delta to look at different eradication measures and their testing of different materials. There's some positive response on copper coverings, copper pipe coverings, copper screen coverings, PVC pipe, and so there are a whole range of localized experiments underway across the larger points of diversion in the Delta. And so that's something that we're watching very closely. Harmful algal blooms. This was an issue for most of the summer that was really restricted into Discovery Bay, but just in the last couple of weeks, we have seen a series of incidents reported up Middle River all the way to the Port of Stockton. And so I want to kind of tip my cap a bit just to the active citizen science program that Restore the Delta is administering around really sampling for cyanobacteria around the Delta whenever they have reports, and they also have a methodology to look for cyanotoxin contaminated water, and I think that's the wave of the future, and hopefully that will be done in an integrated way, and the way that Restore the Delta is doing it and reporting and actually working really actively with the regional and state boards and local water utilities. And so I just think, again, this is an interesting year, right? When we start out like, wow, nobody's seeing harmful algal blooms this summer, and then suddenly in August, we're seeing them quite a bit in the South Delta. And we're not able, that chart, essentially the yellow designated spots, which you can see kind of along Middle River, Old River, those are in the laboratory now. So we can't confirm whether they're a visual sighting that looks like a cyanotoxin or harmful algal bloom, and they're subject to lab confirmation, and then they go to red. So that, and depending upon the level of cyanotoxins that are present there. So this, again, an area of critical active interest. The Delta Science Program has really been a great integrator in this, and so we just look forward to continued collaboration on what the best methodology is to keep people safe and having a better understanding of when these blooms are in the system. Another issue that we've talked about, a couple of new developments, the Sassoon annexation in the California Forever program, that the draft environmental impact report is expected to be released sometime next year on the new city. We published and are revising our water rights analysis based on some of the new land acquisition acquired by California Forever. There is just in July, California Forever applied to create a mutual water company to meet the needs of their acquired lands and presumed municipal operations, and so they are kind of charting an independent course, if you will. We'll develop our own water agency, and that will hold those water rights, develop the infrastructure for delivery of those rights. But we haven't seen those proposals, nor have we seen an amendment to modify their rights at the state board yet. But we're certainly expecting those actions given their filings in July. And the other recent development is that the proposed CEQA expediting, overriding legislation that was envisioned for the port project at Collinsville has been held this year, and so that will not be moving forward. And So I think that was an effort that a lot of folks are paying attention to with respect to what a new port facility at Collinsville would mean. So we'll learn more when the EIR is released. So I wanted to take a moment. I think some of the questions that the board asked, that the council asked earlier, have kind of framed some of the critical issues. I think one, congratulations, Jessica and team, for getting the 15-year report out. I think it's a really great documentation of what the last 15 years have been in the Delta, and evaluating the Delta plan and actions that are consistent with the plan and where we go. I think we've certainly seen an acceleration at pace and scale in habitat restoration, and I think that will continue in anticipated adoption of a water quality control plan update. I think we have a better path forward in identifying the needs for Delta levee investment and channel maintenance activities or dredging that ride with that. And so I think we're seeing a real framework for progress, and I think it's really critical that there are metrics in place to objectively look at the outcomes that are intended in the plan and evaluate how we're doing on an annual basis. So I think that as the questions still not where we need to be in science integration. I think we're seeing too much kind of narrow discipline science, if you will, aimed at a narrow need with an agency sponsor, rather than developing that shared space for data sharing, data integration, and being able to have kind of a common dashboard, if you will, as a decision-making tool. And so I think that's an active area of the interest where both the state board and the council and the Delta Science Program have huge shared interests into the future. And I do believe that the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes and wider water quality control plan update will provide a basis to actually integrate that science. And so, so that's my hope. For the future, is that the updated water quality control plan provides a forum to help kind of drive better integration of key water quality, environmental, human health, and assessment of the other public beneficial uses of water. So I think we need that. I think it would be critically necessary for science and advancements and advancing excuse me, science-based and data-based decision-making, which I think is really needs to be our big metric for the use of science in the Delta. And so I think we're still working to get there. And so I do want to also some of the developments that that our office has been actively involved in with the council, with other participants across the Delta. The Delta Alternative Compliance Plan, as Senator Eggman noted, really gives us all a basis to look at actual water use measured and satellite-driven, satellite-interpreted data on localized consumptive use, and putting these tools to work and getting people to work better. And so I really feel and it's ironic, and I guess in a sense, and maybe it's why it happened, is that it's really an ad hoc, informal group that, well, checks their badges at the door. Doesn't matter who you're working with. How do we put everybody's best thinking together as a forum to actually get to better data on real-time use, as well as bigger water budget analysis in the Delta? So that's certainly a hopeful point. I think this office's work with the Delta Conservancy and the council and the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program, providing incentives for both, well, really 3 areas of action: deficit irrigation, or using less water on a crop, fallowing, or changing crops to lower water use crops, and what that means, and kind of the actions that we take out of that have been, a big catalyst of moving forward with shared understanding of where government programs should most appropriately put incentives to achieve desired outcomes and be able to measure those outcomes. So I think that's something that we're really actively building upon. And then having the data sets that we do provides a real window into how much, when, and for what purposes diverters are using their water across the Delta. So we've really been able to advance that conversation. We've achieved, again, through the work of my predecessor in Michael George in reaching a settlement with Woods Irrigation District, in working with some of the larger diverters on tailored systems to both measure and use satellite data that we can all learn from, pulling that data together. I think it's really been a great partnership to advance open data principles and bring that forward. And I'm hoping that this example can be used in a sense as a model as evaluation of the updated water quality control plan goes forward. So I think as we start to look at data metrics, we need to think about who's interested in the data and how can we bring everybody to the table to look at the same data, rather than have a set of data that is the Delta Science Program data, that is the board's data, that's DWR's data, that's the Bureau's data. And so we've got to get out of that balkanization of data. And I think we're getting there. But of years, as council members have noted, have been very trying in looking at the federal disinvestment in science. And so I think that's where, to Councilmember Zingali's suggestion, I just feel like there's no real viable solution other than the state of California taking a role as a driver, and particularly in the funding side of I think we have enough governance mechanisms to integrate science very effectively. We have amazing partnerships with the federal science agencies, with NOAA, with NIMS, with U.S. Geological Survey in particular, and but we can't take that for granted. We need to actually provide the stimulus to exercise that muscle and make sure that science is there. So I think those are really the fundamentals that we need to focus on. And so I really appreciate the council members' questions and interest in this area, because I think candidly it's the place where on one day I could be the most optimistic and on another the most pessimistic about where we're headed in looking at the underfunding, balkanization, elimination of, and lack of clarity about critical investments in necessary, beneficial infrastructure projects in the Delta that all parties can agree the Delta needs to meet all of our beneficial interests of water. So, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll just ask one more round if any of the members have any other questions for Jay. Yes, Diane.
You know, I was thinking about the metering, and I was thinking about how growing up in the 70s, that's when we started talking about water conservation, and how different people approached it. Some were like, whatever, we'll just do whatever we have to do. Some of us turned off the water, let our lawns dry. Some of us did drought-tolerant kind of landscaping. And I was thinking about how water providers had to do certain things, and how to deliver a certain amount of water, it creates a certain budget. You know, if you're an irrigation district, all of those things. So now that we know our data as a user, what are we doing? So some people are figuring out ways to use less. Some people are probably going to try to use as much as possible so that they don't lose that ability to use that water. And so it's just making me think about what this does for those folks, and how 20, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, how this will affect things too. So it's an interesting process that you're going through, and the data will be interesting. That was just a thought. So one of my questions is, we are hearing a lot about El Nino. And is there anything that you're doing right now, knowing that it's all forecasted and it's all, you know, a mystery really what will happen, but what do you do knowing that this is something that seems to be imminent?
I want to build on your thought process
Okay.
first, because there's another huge factor, which is the dramatic escalation of energy costs that
Right.
is affecting,
Yeah.
especially virtually every farmer, and it's driving conservation in a huge way. And even in this interesting, normal, quote unquote, water year, we are seeing evidence now picking up in modeling, and anecdotally, I can tell you driving across the data of a delta of quite a bit of fallowing this year. And my hypothesis is it's probably driven by energy costs on some level, and I think unpredictability in the agricultural markets. But I've actually reached out to some of the ag commissioners on this to see what they're hearing from farmers. I've reached out to a number of farmers and UC Ag and Natural Resources this year, because, you know, by all accounts, this should be a fairly normal year, but we're seeing anecdotal and modeling evidence that farmers are cutting back on their diversions in the central and southern delta in particular.
Do you think some of that was related to what was going on in the Middle East and the fertilizer and that whole market being uncertain?
Well, I think as a cost driver, right. I think that the energy cost driving factors of higher fertilizer costs, higher fuel, and higher energy costs
Right.
together, I think that's probably the best hypothesis.
Right.
But I would like to report back on that after we've had a chance to check with a number
Yeah.
of the
And the other thing
agricultural
is that
operators around the Delta.
it's unusual for folks to cycle through different crops at different years, and so I don't know if that might be part of it too. The other question I had was related to what Gail asked earlier, related to the Colorado River. Are we learning anything from their activities in what we're doing here?
Sure, and let me actually not completely dodge your question about
Don't
the El
dodge my
Nino
question.
either, because that's, if I'm honest about it, I think about it every morning. I'm also, I think this is principally, how do we get ready for, a storm that really has been unprecedented since the late 1880s?
The El Nino question.
Yes,
Okay.
the El Nino question. And so, is that a 1997 year? Is that a 1986 year? We
Right.
don't know where the stress is going
Right.
to be in the system, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that this is the kind of phenomenon that we need to be more prepared for in the future, and it sort of implicates questions about water rights. What do we do about, flood-weir flows? I can remember talking with Senator Eggman about efforts to true up the ability to put groundwater in the ground, and especially off of big storm events. And we have a water infrastructure system that was designed for the wettest century of the last 2,000 years in the 20th century. And all of the climate projections suggest that we're in for longer, more sustained, hotter droughts. And at the same time, these crazy over-recovery El Nino potential big water years. And I think what it underscores is that we have to redouble our efforts. We're about to see a gubernatorial change, but I think it's redoubling our efforts to better integrate management of both flood and water supply objectives together, and thinking holistically about how we manage to those goals. And I will tell you, I'll just share with you the single most frightening climate study that I have ever seen is a study that Lawrence Berkeley released in 2025, which suggests that by 2040, the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada will become an irregular event.
Yep.
And that snowpack we rely on to
I know.
consistently refill the reservoirs as the summer melt continues.
Yep.
And if we don't have that, this is an example year when we'll be drawing down the reservoirs. So at least we'll be prepared on that basis, but we are very actively drawing down reservoirs in this water year because of the lack of summer inflow from the Sierra snowpack. So there's a bit of a slight precursor, and I appreciate your admonition that we all need to be thinking about what an El Nino super wet year might mean in the Delta, because it petrifies me. I'll be honest. I mean, this is an area of huge concern. And I know it's a concern for all Delta residents that everybody is thinking about what's my plan? What's my plan for safety? What's my plan for my levees? How do we address all of this together? And I
are
think
people paying attention to it?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. But in an ad hoc way. I mean, I do think, I think this administration is also looking at compelling a level of integration in all of these objectives together as well. So I think, I think your concern is well-founded, and I think more and more people are looking at more and more of these projections for what a historic El Nino wet winter would be, and what the challenges are in managing to those conditions as best we can. And so I think this administration is beginning to pull all of that together as well. So I think I think things are moving the right direction, but appreciate your concern, because I think that we all need to be really focusing in this way.
And then going back to the Colorado River, is there parallels to the work you're doing that you're learning from the things that?
Well, it's I think certainly parallels there, and the level of conservation necessary to reconcile what's happening in the greater Colorado, upper Colorado watershed, and reduced snowpack, reduced precipitation throughout the system, and exploitation of groundwater virtually throughout the Southwest. An issue that we wrestle with in California as well. But all of those things come together with, pretty extraordinary conservation obligations, right? Like, there is a 1.6 million acre foot commitment of the lower basin states to conservation, but that's really now the lower basin states are not interested in shorting themselves more until there are active conservation programs identified by the upper basin states. And so we really, so at least in California, we're one state. And so it gives us a better opportunity for reconciliation of supply and demand of water better. And that in itself is really an indicator that we need to have better, more transparent science to understand these challenges. Because I think the hydrology of the future is not the hydrology of the past. And so that really requires a systematic look at how we do better on conservation objectives, as well as thinking about what kind of supply alternatives do we have available to us. And those are huge, huge challenges. And but I think in the next that they will provide really the roadmap for the next generation of water management. I mean, it doesn't. Let me also put this another way. On my optimistic days, I think I meant to also highlight that the state board will be looking, is expected to act on the water quality control plan update issue will be before the state board at the end of October. The sites order will be before the state board this year. The Delta Conveyance Project will be before the state board in the first half of next year. These are things that we've been talking about for 20 years. But we haven't been doing the kind of science monitoring, levy investment, active investment that we need in kind of meeting water quality water supply objectives in the Delta and beyond, as well as actively measuring the outcomes of our habitat projects in a more transparent, accessible way. And we got to be pulling. So recognizing all of those aforementioned issues are likely to be litigated for 3 to 5 years. Hopefully, we can get about the fundamentals of better integrating science and addressing these immediate maintenance and critical issues for both flood protection and supply in Delta and beyond in a systematic way, and provide a platform to address these bigger hydrologic changes that we clearly see happening and driven by the loss of the Sierra Nevada snowpack.
Well, thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Diane. Those are great questions. I know we're about 15 minutes over on this, but we do have 2 other members that have quick questions for you, Jay, if you can stay for just a couple minutes with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. So maybe just as a follow-up at a future meeting, on the golden mussel, I have a really specific question. When the golden mussels, now that it's a state of emergency from the counties, when they settle in kind of any of the pipes, I know we just had a really long conversation on diversion, and I don't want to kind of get us further off course, but it would be really interesting for me to understand on the science for the golden mussel, if it is because of the way they're settling and how invasive they are, if it is changing flow and diversion patterns. So if that could just be a follow-up, even in writing, I just think that would be super interesting. And then just in terms of if in your role with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, as you're looking at that invasive mussel regulation, and I don't know if we do comments on that too, but it would just be really helpful to understand that kind of both from diversion and flows, and then what Fish and Wildlife will be doing there. So I don't expect full knowledge on that, but I think it's an additional piece of the golden mussel than what you spoke about.
Great.
Thank you.
Will do.
And Daniel.
Yeah, Jay, I was just wondering, in your investigation of the fallow farms that you're seeing and the factors behind it, I wonder if workforce instability driven by federal immigration policies is a factor out here. Something occurred to me. But mostly I wanted to just say thank you for such a thought-provoking and engaging session. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. I'll add that to my factor. I've a number of questions that I'm exploring with individual farmers and with the agricultural community across the Delta. So I'm this is a really interesting time because it's just not. It was, I think it's not principally a water accessibility issue that we're seeing because the areas that we're seeing fallowing on go far beyond the areas of stress that we highlighted or that I highlighted in the presentation today. So I think there are definitely bigger factors going on.
Thank you.
Great.
Great
Thank
questions.
you. Look forward to following up with all of you.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this, Emma?
There are no public comments in the room or online, Councilmember Zingali.
None in Eureka. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next agenda item is Delta Cyanobacteria Harmful Algal Blooms Monitoring Strategy. So I'll welcome up Nick Rowlands, environmental scientist with the Delta Stewardship Council, and the rest of his team that he's going to introduce to talk to us about harmful algal blooms.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. Good morning, Chair Lee, council members. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a long-time listener, first-time caller, as they would say on the radio. As Chair Lee said, my name is Nick Rowlands. I'm an environmental scientist at the Council. I work in the Science Communication and Synthesis Unit, and it's my pleasure today to introduce this presentation. We are going to be talking about harmful algal blooms, or HABs, which is something that I know the Council has heard a lot about recently. And in fact, Jay, thank you so much for teeing us up so nicely and also for flagging the recent uptick in HABs activity across the Delta. Last month, you actually had a kind of a HABs 101 from Delta lead scientist, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers, to set us up this month. She spoke, I think, about sort of what HABs are, why we care about them, where and when they take place in the Delta. And this month, we're going to talk to you a bit about what we're trying to do about that. And we're going to focus mostly on something called the Delta CHABs monitoring strategy. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it's a strategy that was developed a few years back with significant leadership from the Council, and it aims at coordinating or helping to coordinate HABs monitoring across the Delta so we can manage them better to protect the ecosystem and public health. Before we continue, I want to pause very quickly just to clarify something, which is that you're going to hear the word HAB a lot, harmful algal bloom. You're also going to hear CHAB, which is a specific type of harmful algal bloom that I think Keith is going to speak a bit more about. I'm going to get in trouble from the HABs heads in the room for saying this, but for our purposes today, you can think of those things as essentially equivalent. You can think of them as the same thing. What you won't hear, or I hope you won't hear, is the word chab, which is what my 8-year-old daughter calls CHABs. And she was actually, when she learned I was giving this presentation, she was super excited that, in her words, Daddy is giving a presentation to his work bosses about HABs, BABs, and CHABs. So it's a word that's in my head. I will try not to let it come out of my mouth. We'll see. And you may remember actually that a BAB is a beneficial algal bloom. So not all algal blooms are harmful. We're very lucky today to have 3 speakers who will most certainly not say the word CHAB. They are all co-chairs of the CHABs monitoring strategy implementation team, another mouthful, but one that they will explain. And so we have Keith Baumer-Gregson, a research biologist from the US Geological Survey. We have Laura Twaderkleb, an environmental program manager from the State Water Board. And at the end there, we have Ellen Fries, a program manager from DWR as well. And I should have said doctor in front of all of their names. They're all doctors. Keith and Laura are going to kick us off by talking about the strategy itself, what we've done so far and what to expect in the future. We are then, like you did with Jay, going to take a quick break, just to kind of get your heads back together, chance to ask a couple of burning questions, but there will be an opportunity to ask more at the end because we're going to want to come back and hear from Ellen, who's going to talk about a Delta CHABs monitoring research project that is taking place that was actually funded by the Council as part of the 2025 Delta Research Awards. And then we will be done. So hopefully that sounds like a plan. And without further ado, I will pass this on to Keith. And it looks like we actually have a clicker. So there we go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick, for the introduction, and thank you to the Council for the opportunity to present here. I'm Keith Baumer-Gregson at the U.S. Geological Survey. And CHABs were first documented in the Delta in 1999, and on the slide and on the image here, you can see an image of a bloom at the Stockton waterfront, and that water is green from the cyanobacterial cells, and if you look closely, you can see that streaks in the water, which really show a very high density of cells in the water. And in this case, the bloom is formed by microcystis, which is a type of cyanobacterium and is the dominant toxin producer in the Delta. And cyanotoxins that are produced by these cells can contaminate water that's used for drinking, recreation, or agriculture. And through monitoring special studies, we're seeking to understand the extent and magnitude of the actual impacts of cyanotoxins in the Delta. And so to the next slide, while there's extensive environmental monitoring, there still remain key gaps CHABs. Core monitoring programs that exist in the Delta are run by different entities and were designed for management questions related to other management needs, such as salinity or fishes. And therefore, not all the sites or parameters are optimally suited for understanding CHABs and their dynamics. Additionally, there's not been a sustained long-term monitoring for CHABs in the Delta. Monitoring has been pieced together through various special studies over the last 25 years. And so more coordination could help focus the resources that are available on the priority management needs and also help to develop a sustained CHABs monitoring program, which would generate the data that's needed for forecasting, managing, or mitigating blooms. And so the need for a CHABs strategy to guide monitoring and data collection has been discussed for many years, and it reached a real turning and inflection point in 2021. This is when the members of the Central Valley Regional Board and Department of Fish and Wildlife approached the Delta Science Program to see if the program could help create a strategy. And the program was approached and wound up proving very instrumental because of the extensive experience in facilitating conversations and soliciting engagement from a wide variety of stakeholders in the Delta. And so it was decided to start this journey with a workshop. And so in 2022, a workshop was held in Sacramento to hear from community members and begin to identify the different priorities within the community and what the needs for CHABs monitoring were. And then after this workshop, an interagency team took the content The strategy was written to apply to a broad audience, and it was hoped that entities from different sectors and representing different interests in the Delta are able to find a place where they can plug in and contribute to the goals of the strategy. So the strategy is structured around 5 different goals, which are seen on the slide here. Those include enhancing Delta CHAB collaboration, identifying monitoring questions, goals, and objectives, developing a CHAB monitoring program, develop collaborative reporting protocols, and utilize a data sharing platform. And these 5 goals really kind of connect to 3 foundational pillars that have been identified for many years, which one is just that increase in coordination. The second being enhancing the monitoring of CHABs to develop a CHAB monitoring program similar to the other IEP monitoring programs, which could provide sustained and consistent data on CHABs. And then lastly, making it broadly available to the public and other scientists. And so to help achieve these 5 goals, 26 actionable recommendations are included in the strategy, as well as 20 different research special studies. And we want to highlight the role of the Delta Stewardship Council and the science program for dedicating staff resources to help develop this strategy. Tricia Lee led this effort and was an exceptional colleague to work with. The council also helped fund time to support one of the co-authors of the strategy, which was also very instrumental. And so I'll now pass this to Laura, who will discuss how we're working towards implementing these goals in the strategy.
Thanks, Keith. I'm Laura Club. I'm an environmental program manager at the State Water Board. Thank you very much for having us here to talk to you today. So have to advance the slide myself. So I'm going to talk about our implementation progress. So since finalizing the strategy document, the work has shifted to implementing the strategy. The overall goal of implementation, as Keith mentioned, is to establish a coordinated Delta-wide CHAB monitoring program. However, implementation of this strategy is a largely volunteer-led effort because there is no dedicated funding to support the implementation team. Therefore, the success of the implementation of the strategy really falls to the ongoing coordination and collaboration of the Delta science community. So over the next several slides, I will talk to you about the steps that the other co-chairs and I and others in the Delta community have taken to implement the strategy, and I'll also highlight some areas where more work is needed. So this slide shows the CHABS implementation team, or CHABS IT for short, organizational structure that the co-chairs have developed. So after finalizing the strategy document, 4 co-chairs came forward from different agencies to lead implementation of the strategy. And I do want to highlight that it has been very helpful that the DSC has continued to support implementation of the strategy by providing staff support. So the co-chairs coordinate with state and federal agencies, tribes, environmental justice communities, and others in the Delta who are interested in improving the science and monitoring enterprise around CHABs in the Delta. And we do so through holding quarterly CHABs implementation team meetings with members of those groups that I just mentioned. We also establish subcommittees who work on really targeted components of strategy implementation. So during 2025 and 2026, we've had 2 subcommittees meeting monthly to work on developing the annual CHABs workshops to improve coordination and collaboration around CHABs monitoring and science. And then we also have a management questions subcommittee that has worked to finalize a set of management questions that will guide implementation of the strategy. We also plan to establish some new subcommittees over the next year, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. In addition, the co-chairs coordinate with agency leadership on behalf of the implementation team and other decision-making bodies within the Delta science community, as well as members of the public and tribes to get their feedback on how we implement the strategy. And so one of the first things that the co-chairs and the implementation team have tried to tackle is developing a roadmap for implementation that includes an adaptive management process. So as I mentioned, we have limited resources to implement this strategy. And so the implementation roadmap tries to focus us on implementing one goal at a time. Not that we're only implementing that goal, but the implementation team really focuses its efforts on an individual goal at a time so that we can make really good progress towards implementing that goal. And so in our first year, 2025, of implementing the strategy, really focused on implementing Goal 1 to enhance Delta CHAB collaboration. This year, we have focused more on finalizing management questions to guide the rest of the implementation of the strategy. And in years 3 and 4, we plan to focus more efforts towards implementing goals 4 and 5 to develop collaborative reporting protocols and utilize a data sharing platform. All while we're working towards implementing goals 1, 2, 4, and 5, we are simultaneously working to implement Goal 3. I think Goal 3, develop a coordinated CHAB monitoring program, is it's sort of the culmination of efforts towards all of the goals, towards implementing all of the goals of the strategy. They all contribute to Goal 3, which is the ultimate outcome of the implementation of this strategy. And then as we've envisioned this roadmap, we have decided that we would like to operate over a 5-year timescale for adaptive management of the implementation of the strategy. So in year 5, we will review our progress so far, objectives, and implementation as needed to improve our process and continue to address gaps. So now I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about the progress that we've made towards some of these individual strategy goals. So the first goal of the strategy is to enhance Delta CHAB collaboration. And we really hit the ground running with working towards this goal during our first year. In 2025, we hosted the first annual CHAB workshop. It was attended by members of the public, tribes, Restore the Delta, and various state and federal agency representatives, as well as the Delta Regional Monitoring Program and others who are interested in CHABs. And it provides a forum for sharing science and monitoring information, and it also is a way for us to determine how the Delta community wants to focus our efforts on implementing this strategy over the next couple of years. As I mentioned before, we also have been holding quarterly implementation team meetings. We developed a project charter that is hosted on the IEP website. And we host monthly co-chairs meetings where we plan the CHABS workshops and the quarterly implementation team meetings. For 2026, we are forming a new subcommittee to further develop the five-year implementation roadmap and adaptive management process. And goal 2 of the strategy to direct our science and monitoring efforts to ensure that we produce the information that is needed to understand how to mitigate, manage, and control for CHABs in the Delta to protect public health. And so we established a subcommittee in 2025 to finalize management questions that fall into the categories listed on this slide of status and trends, environmental drivers, public health, modeling, mitigation and prevention, management actions, and environmental impacts. And an example of a couple of our management questions are under environmental drivers. The management question is, what are the relative influences of flow and water residence time, nutrients, temperature, grazing, competition, and other environmental factors in driving CHABs in different habitat types? And then tying that to management actions, one of our questions under the management actions category is, what environmental drivers of CHABs are within and beyond control via management activities? So the subcommittee that we established in 2025 coordinated with agency leadership and the other interested stakeholders in the Delta community working on CHABs to finalize a set of management questions, and we're now producing a report that will be publicly released that describes the management questions as well as metrics for tracking progress of different science and monitoring activities towards addressing those management questions. And we plan to periodically evaluate our progress towards addressing those questions. So goal 3 of the strategy is to develop a monitoring program, and we have made quite a bit of progress towards this goal. So Ellen has led efforts to synthesize data to identify regional patterns in CHABs and is going to have 2 publications coming out this year on those efforts. And this work helps identify gaps in existing monitoring and priority areas for expanding monitoring. Keith and the USGS led development of a CHABs monitoring designs report that recommends different options for monitoring CHABs in the Delta that can be tailored to different agencies' priorities. So for example, one of the design options is focused on monitoring for public health, and that was something that the State Water Board was really interested in seeing. Using the monitoring designs report as a guide, I developed the new proposed HAB monitoring requirements for the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And these requirements would establish a network of regular harmful algal bloom monitoring locations in the Delta that would be monitored each year during the bloom season. In addition, the implementation team has made substantial progress towards implementing the 20 special studies that are recommended in the strategy document for filling scientific knowledge gaps. So goal 4 of the strategy is to develop collaborative reporting protocols to standardize data collection and reporting. And this is something that Ellen will talk about in a few minutes. She's going to present about a microcystis visual index project funded by DWR and the Delta Science Program that will further goal 4. And then goal 5, to utilize a data sharing platform to integrate CHAB data and make it publicly accessible, is something that the co-chairs plan to address more over the next year. We're forming a new subcommittee to explore funding options and other efforts that we can leverage to make this a reality for the Delta. I do want to mention, before I move on to summing this up, that these 2 goals have received less attention than the others and may require some additional funding to fully implement. And so that's something that we're actively working on. And so just to recap what I've talked about and talk about our priorities for the next year, we are working on finalizing a management questions report. We will be planning an annual workshop for spring of 2027. And then we're forming 2 new subcommittees to further develop our implementation roadmap and adaptive management process, as well as begin working on data integration. And then we're working to identify funding for special studies and to further implementation of the strategy. Okay, thank you for listening.
So I think I should turn it on. We can pause there for a quick brain break and maybe 2 or 3 questions, no more than that, so we can keep rolling and get to Ellen's part of the presentation. But I'm sure there is stuff that people want to ask at this point.
Yes, Councilmember Eggman has a question.
Thank you. And as I understand it, because I think before we used to think that some sprays help, some copper sprays, and we would get, as I recall, we would have to get permits from the feds in order for the state folks to be able to apply treatments that they would do early in spring to help reduce that. Do we still do any of that, or has that just proved not to be effective? And you talk about monitoring, but that green water you showed is right outside in front of our Chamber of Commerce building and our lovely waterfront that we've invested millions in.
Yes, so hi, I'm Ellen Priest with Department of Water Resources, and
Get closer to your mic. There you go.
is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so spraying, I'm not aware of any copper spraying in the Delta outside of Clifton Court Forebay area, just because of issues with the listed fish species. There really hasn't been any permitting that I'm aware of that would allow for that. And in fact, mitigation in the Delta has overall for HABs been pretty limited. There have been some bubbler lines installed at the Stockton waterfront.
I got plenty of money for bubblers, but I still see green water.
And then we were funded from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to do a pilot dredging study this fall in the Stockton waterfront, and the goal of that will be to remove stock as well as reduce nutrients from the sediments. And so
Is that the one in conjunction with the port?
it is in conjunction with the Port of Stockton, and as well as several other partners, including Restore the Delta is also a partner on that project. So that's to be determined if that will be successful or not, but we are quite limited in our mitigation options at this time of what we are allowed to do to mitigate blooms in the Delta.
Right, and it goes back to Jay's earlier presentation about flows, right? Because we do know it occurs when we have limited flows, warm water, and so it makes sense that dredging would help.
We're hopeful that it will work. It is a good option also for the Stockton waterfront because the port is dredging just downstream, so that equipment can be mobilized relatively easily and less expensive, than other options. But yeah, it's these kind of dead-end, shallow, very warm areas where we tend to see the most severe blooms, and maybe you could see that on the pictures that were shared in the presentation. They're all kind of dead-end.
And they're all
Warm
where people
areas.
live.
Yeah,
They're all where
as well.
people live and animals are and all those things. Dredging used to be a very political hot button too. Has that diminished? Are we all singing from the same hymnal on this?
There has generally seemed to be support for this particular dredging effort.
Historically, the agricultural community has been very invested in it, and everybody else has, people have said, no, you can't. So I'm glad to see it. Looks like we're all coming together on that one.
Yeah, and I have heard that discovery bay isn't necessarily related to harmful algal blooms, but independently will be done. And if that moves forward, that may potentially also help.
I'm holding my questions till the end, but yes, I'll ask, yeah.
Okay, because that was all, Mike. We're talking about the compliance of monitoring, but we're not really talking about much on mitigation or actual treatment of the blooms.
That is considered in the strategy as a pathway we want to move forward to get to, and we say that we need more data as we move along towards that to help us understand what tools will be effective and where they will be effective in the Delta.
The Central Valley Water Board had planned to do a study of what mitigation options might be feasible for the Delta, but when we had state budget cuts a couple years ago, they had to put a pause on that study. That is something that we are hoping to still find a way to move forward, because it's not even clear what would be feasible with all permitting requirements, regulatory requirements for mitigation.
Just a quick follow-up that the Delta Independent Science Board has considered undertaking that effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nick.
Awesome, thank you. Let's carry on then, I guess, with Ellen, and I will shoot the clicker down.
Yes, good morning. I've already introduced myself, so I'll just jump right into my presentation. So this is an exciting project that, as Nick mentioned, was funded by the Delta Science Program, and we just kicked the project off earlier this year, and in fact, one of my colleagues is out there today collecting samples for the project. So I first wanted to give an overview of the Microcystis Visual Index. You've heard that term from Laura, and it's something that I'm going to be mentioning quite a bit during my presentation. The Microcystis Visual Index, we also call the MVI for short, and it's a scale of 1 to 5 that was developed by the Environmental Monitoring Program at the Department of Water Resources. It's a field-based scoring system that rates bloom severity from visual observations of surface water. So looking at the color of the water, the scum formation, bloom severity by someone that's out there monitoring the water. So what do they see when they look at the water? So field crews will assign a score when they're out sampling of 1 to 5 at each monitoring site during their routine visits. And this is great because it's rapid, low cost. It just relies on having a person out in the field recording the data. And extends spatial coverage relative to many other monitoring programs or what CHAB sampling alone could support. And it can be used to feed early warning. So it can be used to the state freshwater harmful algal bloom program to help them determine when they should put signage up in an area. And it complements quantitative data rather than replacing it. And it's actually the longest CHAB data set that we have for the Delta, extending back to 2007. So on the scale that you can see up on the screen, 1 is absent. That means there's no microcystis seen in the water. 2 means low, there's low amounts. So you may see a few flakes of the microcystis. 3 is moderate, a little bit more than 2. And then 4 is when you see higher. And so you're starting to see maybe little bits of scum starting to form. And then 5 is very high. That's when you see kind of a thick, oily type scum. And there's pictures of what this may look like in the real world directly below that. And I just really want to highlight that there's quite a bit of subjectivity in this. So especially between like the 2 and 3, it depends how often an observer has been out. It may inform their scores and how much microcystis they've seen. So kind of extending that last comment, it's just a person's judgment call. So the same bloom with different observers can lead to different scores. And I showed 2 pictures below where this may be the case. Depending on who the observer is, they may rank both of those as an MVI 3, or they may rank the one on the left as an MVI 2 and the one on the right as an MVI 3. And so that can impact your scoring over time. Light, the amount of sunlight is reflecting on the water. Wind and time of day can also shift the scores. So scores can be difficult to compare across people and days. Also, a score cannot be used to determine if the bloom is toxic or not. Visual appearances do not reliably predict microcystin concentrations. So a bloom can look really bad and not have any toxins, or a bloom can look relatively mild and potentially have toxins. So moving on to our project aims. 2 specific aims that I'm going to discuss today. The first aim of our project is to remove that observer bias. And we're doing that by using digital photos and an image classification model to produce MBI rankings. So an image classification model is a program that's trained on thousands of labeled example images, so it learns to recognize patterns. And then it can look at a new image and predict which category it belongs to. And so we're going to be feeding thousands of different pictures of microcystis in the delta into our image classification model to train it. The next aim is to relate individual MBI rankings to microcystis biomass and toxicity through comprehensive field sampling. So on this slide, I'm going to discuss how we're turning a priority identified in the strategy into actual action. So in the first box, the 2022 to 2026 Science Action Agenda called for this type of work. It specifically called for real-time bloom monitoring and forecasting, toxin pattern tracking, and shared tools for decision-making. The Delta CHAB monitoring strategy considered the information in the Science Action Agenda, and it identified the MVI standardization as a special study and a priority need. And then the Delta from the project through the Delta Research Awards Program. So this project is really neat because it leverages a wide network of different people and agencies, and it includes both state agencies, it includes private consultants, it includes Shingle Spring Band of Miwok Indians, it includes the Delta Stewardship Council, it includes a lot of different people, and so that's really neat because we're going to get pictures from all over the Delta to feed into our to show you what some of our field sampling looks like for this project. So we wanted to relate, this is the aim where we wanted to relate MBI rankings to the biomass and toxicity of microcystis. So on the left, it just shows one of my colleagues, Minay Berg, collecting water samples. And then on the right, it shows kind of more in-depthly the different types of samples that we're collecting. So we'll be taking surface grab samples, so right at the water surface where the bloom is most visible. So this is what matches with your eye, so the observing score and the camera. Then we're going to take a sonde and profile that through the water column. So the probe will be lowered through the water, and it will measure various water quality conditions, including chlorophyll and temperature at different depths. And this just will show us, is the bloom concentrated up at the surface of the water, or does it actually extend into deeper layers? And we will also be collecting discrete samples at different depths throughout the water column to give lab-confirmed data on the microcystis biomass and the microcystin levels at each point, not just at the surface. Because we are collecting these samples at the same place and time as the MBI scores, we can directly compare what the bloom looked like to what it actually was. Another complementary project that we're doing along with this is the MBI method comparison. And so wanted to show you on the left, these are people peering over into the water and ranking the MBI from the boat on the top, from the shore on the bottom. And we're comparing that to what a bucket scoop would look like, so scooping up the water, and what is the MBI on that compared to when you're peering over into the water. And then we'll also be using a white tray with a grid to see if that changes what the MBI score may be. And then here's a picture of one of the tools that we're using in the field. It's an AquaSense is what it's called, but it's a portable imaging system. And it's really neat because we can collect our water and feed it into this instrument, and it takes these snapshots of the cyanobacteria or other phytoplankton that may be present in our sample. And it automatically measures how big, like the microcystis colonies are that are shown on this screen. So those little black blobs, those are all different microcystis colonies and how they would look under a microscope. And so we don't need microscope or lab processing. We can do all a layer alongside. So the final outcomes from this project, which will be done in the next couple of years, is that we will be developing a phone app, and this will be working also along with the San Francisco Estuary Institute, who will help lead the development of that. And anyone can go out and take a picture, send it through this app, and it can score what the MBI is, and then we could have a map that's showing in real time what the MBI scores are all over the Delta. So this will allow for faster, more reliable bloom alerts, and then potentially support public health and management decisions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ellen, and Keith and Laura as well. So I just want to wrap up super briefly by reiterating just why the Delta Sea Hubs monitoring strategy is so important. We've thrown a bunch of information at you over the last 20, 25 minutes or so. Hopefully not too much, but we do know it's a lot. But I want to stress that's not even scratching the surface of all of the HABs-related work that's taking place right now in the Delta. I mean, there's monitoring and reporting taking place by a whole bunch of different groups. State Water Board and Restore the Delta here in Stockton are just two examples of that. There's groups building machine learning models to try to predict harmful algal blooms. There's folks working on environmental DNA, people trying to organize and standardize all of the different data sets that are floating around. You heard from Ellen about a project to dredge, McLeod Lake to scoop up the algae and see if that can, stop them from forming blooms next year. So I think you get the picture. There's a ton going on. There are lots of different organizations doing this work. And the strategy, it ties it all together. So it's this common kind of community-developed framework that helps us figure out what to do and how to do it. And, so far it's not fully funded. And, all of this work, honestly, has been kind of cobbled together from different pots of funding from different places. But having this strategy in place that has already developed priorities, what it means is that when resources do become available, the Delta HABs community is able to kind of to jump on that and to put them to the best possible use as efficiently as possible, because this structure is already in place. And it's also really important for the council to continue to play this leadership role in developing and pushing the strategy forward. Like Laura said, this whole thing lives and dies by the collaboration and coordination of multiple different groups, state and federal agencies, water contractors, tribes, non-profits, for-profits, community groups, the academia, the whole work. And the council is in a great position to help to draw these different groups together and to help make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. And just to sum it all up, the whole reason for this is to get more information into our hands so that we can better understand HABs, how, where, why, when they form, so that we can take action to hopefully prevent them from happening so often. If they are happening, put information earlier into people's hands so they can take steps potentially to protect themselves, and ultimately to reduce the harm and the risk that's posed by HABs to the ecosystem and also to communities that live, work, and play across the whole of the Delta. So that's kind of what it's all about and why we're so excited to be working on this and moving it forward. So thank you so much. That's us done, and I think we can now take a few more questions that you've been holding in.
Thank you, Nick, and the team that you brought here. That was incredibly insightful, and we really appreciate it. Diane had mentioned that we had a DPIIC meeting a couple of years ago here in Stockton, and the focus was on harmful algal blooms, and a lot of the work that you've done was just a vision at that time. And so it's really encouraging to see all the progress being made, and we totally understand that this is a great framework and a foundation for what will hopefully become a future funded projects out of this, and be able to move things forward even more quickly. So we really appreciate all the work that you're doing and the information you brought here today. And Diane, I know you had a couple comments.
So I get really excited that you guys were coming today, so thank you for being here. I want to kind of go back for people that haven't maybe watched anything about this. So I want to start with, why is it called harmful? I was before I was a county supervisor, I was with the East District, had water bodies that had harmful algae blooms, and we had folks that were hiking and their dogs were going into the water and dying. We had people going swimming in places where they shouldn't have, and they were having health issues. I understand that there's even concerns about the air quality for folks that live near these harmful algae blooms, and typically those are vulnerable communities. So those are just a few of the harmful reasons why we're concerned about it. Am I characterizing it correctly? Should I go a little further? Is that a good narrow summary? Okay, good. So we're looking at, and I find it really interesting, the kind of the approach that everybody's doing. It seems that during DPIIC we talked about satellite imaging, but it's so far away that that's not as predictable. Is that why you weren't talking about?
No, we are actively trying to work on enhancing the use of satellite imagery for blooms in the Delta. So there's a separate project that's funded by NOAA that Ellen and I are co-PIs on, and one of that is visualizing the higher resolution satellite imagery that can resolve places like Discovery Bay and Stockton. So we were hoping to have a beta dashboard of that to come out, and then that's also a priority, is to try and continue to secure funding to do more validation and work to make those data available in a way that's meaningful to the Delta community, the decision makers.
And then I think there was even some discussion about drones possibly being, because if you look at the Delta for folks, it's not just this one place. It is zillions of places where this can bloom. And what we're looking at, I mean, these are really telling photographs of what you're showing, but these are places we know that this comes up a lot. But the issue, going back to the harmful part, is that somebody in the Delta who wants to go kayaking, or who wants to go fishing, or who wants to have their kids go swimming, they don't know what that is. And so one of the things that I find interesting is that right now it's really what we can visually see. I'm hoping there's going to be some predictors so that we can get ahead of it, and I know that's part of it. I know in Discovery Bay, I'm interested, and all along my coast, because I have Big Break in Oakley, and I have, Holland Track. I have all these little places where people like to spend time. My own kids we used to go to a place, and there was a big tree swing, and they would jump in the water, and now I'm afraid to kind of let my grandkids go do that because I don't know how to predict that. So I'm hoping that we can get to that point. So I really appreciate the work, but I'm interested in finding ways that I could find maybe some funding locally to get ahead of it. And every year I reach out to my environmental health folks and my water folks. I'm like, what can we do to get ahead of it, make people aware? So I think there might be an opportunity to teach people about this and be a part of the monitoring, if it's imaging that we can do, and teach people how to do that while at the same time teaching them how to be aware of it ahead of time too. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. The other thing that I was curious about is, I saw the heat map of kind of where you've seen that. Does that correlate with other things that other agencies that are related are monitoring? And I'm not going to go too far, but like the gold mussel work that's being done, does that cross over? Are there conditions that kind of feed it? I was thinking of the nutrients that it creates. So is there crossover happening with that research?
I speak for the USGS, in our monitoring stations. I think with the golden mussels, we try, I think, a lot of the groups to to leverage the fact that we have crews in the water. So we've like been adding additional like golden mussel monitoring
Perfect.
stations to our like
Yeah.
other water quality stations. Because we're out there, it's like
Yeah.
helpful. We've been had conversations with Contra Costa Water District. Like there's a lot of networks happening. I know Ellen's been in Stockton a lot, doing her HAB sampling, and I just feel like you're starting to see, well, hypothesizing potential impacts from golden mussels on the water quality or water clarity there. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, actually, we have archived a bunch of our samples from Stockton over the years and are able to go back and use molecular tools to look at golden mussel in our samples, which is pretty interesting. And so we're in the process of doing that, and we're able to detect them, prior to the first visual confirmation, which is very interesting. And so the density of using eDNA, these molecular tools, it is kind of difficult to use, but we're trying to see if we can tools. I will say, just visually, we are definitely seeing golden mussels on the equipment that we deploy in Stockton, and we never saw it last year. I know they were there last year, but they were never coating our equipment like they are this year.
Yeah.
So we're definitely, that's part of our work.
Interesting. Again, I just want to kind of emphasize, I think there's more opportunities for the public to help with this. And in helping maybe help people understand why it is harmful and that they need to be careful.
Yeah, I think Restore the Delta is an amazing example of that. And if there's potential to expand those community science networks, we've also been working with.
I'd even create some money if it was something that I could afford.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Emma, do we have any public comments on this item?
We do, Madam Chair. We have 2 requests to comment in the room. Our first request for comment is Spencer Fern with Restore the Delta. You can come up and use our microphone up here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's not morning. Oh.
Make sure you're really close to the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, chair member. Good afternoon, chair members. My name is Spencer Fern. I'm with the science program manager with Restore the Delta, doing a lot of the work in collaboration with a lot of the people on this panel right here. I just want to start off my comment by I want to say thank you. Partner strategy, I think it sets it sets the seeds in motion for a community to get involved with monitoring, and the collaborative work is making something that anybody can follow a template, which is really important for passing information throughout the Delta, through its communities, for harmful algal bloom, or understanding harmful algal blooms. With that said, I think Jay said it earlier in his presentation that he would like to see more groups like Restore the Delta, and although I will say I appreciate the call-outs, I also full-heartedly agree that I'd love to see more groups like Restore the Delta in many parts of the Delta being able to monitor in effective ways, being able to get information out to the public, increase public awareness, make it so that people are safe when they're recreating out there. And I kind of want to close off my comment with echoing some of the concerns that Board Member Eggman and Board Member Burgess mentioned in some of their comments about mitigation. And, I know that the project that Dr. Priest is working on with the dredging, and that work is a means of trying to see if there's something that can mitigate harmful algal blooms in the future, and see if that's something that can be used elsewhere. But I do agree that I think a lot of the studies in the Delta as it currently stands with harmful algal blooms are when there's an existence of blooms, and not necessarily on the side of how do we prevent these from happening. And I think the ultimate tool of managing blooms in an ideal world is to prevent them from happening in the first place. But I just wanted to continue to show my support for the partner monitoring strategy, and continue to see, and hopefully maybe there is some crossover where we can start helping out, especially in the Stockton area with Restore the Delta on maybe even the golden mussel front. But thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Our next request to comment is from Daniel Carrillo with Restore the Delta.
afternoon, board members and the chair. I am a part of Restore the Delta as a climate water advocate, and as an individual who has recreated a lot within the Stockton waters, all this stuff is not new to me. In the sense of these sea habs and seeing all these harmful algal blooms. And as an individual who fishes a lot, I know that a lot of these people here within the Stockton area and a lot of people who live here consume like the fish within the water. And it is really sad to see that that it's come to this state, but I really appreciate the work that everyone has done over the years and into the future as well, to have better monitoring systems and prevention acts for the harmful algal blooms. And I just am here to show my support for everyone here, and as well as a person who recreates, because I do understand, I think Chair or Board Member Diane discussing about like even you being concerned with your children recreating out in the water, and it's such an important, because the Delta is used by, as I said previously, by so many people within the Stockton area and just other parts of the Delta. So thank you for your time, and yes.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and making a comment. We appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you, Nick and the team. We appreciate you being here. Wonderful presentation. Great engagement by our council members. I love that.
Your daughter should be proud.
That's right.
I will always remember it now, though.
I know, me too.
I know it does, actually.
It does.
It's a nice one.
All right, and next up, we have our report on the 2026 Interweaving Traditional Knowledge Series. So I'll welcome up Dylan Chappell, our Environmental Program Manager from the Council.
All right, good morning, Chair Lee and council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I'm honored to share an update on the recent Interweaving Traditional Knowledge Roundtable series led by council staff in collaboration with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and the California Indian Environmental Alliance. So as the plaque indicates, my name is Dylan Chappell, and I'm the Environmental Program Manager for the Adaptive Management Unit in our Delta Science program. So just a little bit of setting the stage here, kind of answering this basic question: how did we arrive at the Interweaving Traditional Knowledge Roundtable series? And I think, as many of you are aware, this series builds on years of effort by council staff and partners. And tribal governments and communities in California have experienced many years of marginalization, exclusion, and forced assimilation. Incorporating tribal perspectives into the Delta Stewardship Council's work requires understanding, acknowledging, and working in partnerships to address historic wrongs and help ensure that tribes and indigenous perspectives are represented in environmental decision-making in the system. So to that end, Council held its first tribal listening session in 2023, featuring presentations from tribes and tribal serving organizations. And I think while that is a few years ago at this point, as I was preparing for this, it also struck me that this is almost like if we had our first presentation on science in 2023. So this is something I really want to underscore as I walk through this, that we're still in the early days of this. These are still very preliminary steps, and a lot of what we're doing is helping set the stage for future conversations. So the Tribal and Environmental Justice Issue Paper, as I think most of you are aware, all of you are aware, was adopted by the Council in 2025. And this provides foundational knowledge of tribal issues past and present, and includes a set of goals and strategies for addressing tribal and environmental justice issues. So the goals and strategies from the issue paper are the central motivation for the Traditional Knowledge Roundtable series. These goals and strategies include investing in relationships and trust, working through trust community partners, making it easy to participate, and enhancing coordination and connections between and within state agencies and local governments. So specifically Goal 3, which is to promote visibility and understanding of tribal and environmental justice in the Delta through research, policy development, and communications, and the strategies associated with Goal 3 really set the stage for this event. I think also there's an awareness that the Delta Plan identifies traditional knowledge as a key source of best available science in the Delta, but as I just mentioned, it's been less integrated into research and management compared to the predominant science practiced by government, academic, and private entities. So to further address this gap in the science realm, Dr. Shoko Shinbrat from my team at the Delta Science Program led a team of authors from the Stewardship Council's Science Program and Planning Division that published a peer-reviewed paper on interweaving traditional knowledge to create a meaningful space for Indigenous voices in Delta science. So that's sort of the pillars, and at the end of my presentation, I'll also go into at least touch on many other ways that the council staff is working towards these interweaving goals. So building on these efforts, hosting a free event open to the public was our next step. And so how did we go about planning this event? And to make sure that our process was reflective of the recommendations from the papers and other efforts, we supported small contracts to co-plan with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and the nonprofit California Indian Environmental Alliance to produce a program that was directly and authentically driven by tribal and tribal-serving perspectives. I want to acknowledge Crystal Moreno and Zach Chagone from Shingle Springs and Sherry Norris and Michelle Rivera from the California Indian Environmental Alliance for all their hard work putting this series together. The group decided to spread the program over 3 days in June and July, with the first day opened by Vice Chair Melissa Tayaba of Shingle Springs and an opening song led by singers Troy Hatch and Petey Ramirez. These first 2 days were hybrid with in-person attendance at CNRA headquarters in Sacramento, and day 3 was virtual. It's also important, just as we share how we plan the event, to just be very clear about what we mean by traditional knowledge. And we acknowledge that there are a lot of terms used by different folks in this space, but based on input and conversations across efforts, this is the one we settled on to move forward. And so traditional knowledge, or TK, includes but is not limited to traditional ecological knowledge, and it broadly describes the place-based knowledge held by tribes and indigenous experts. And then to cover the other end of our title here, what do we mean by interweaving? So essentially, interweaving describes a process that transcends the common approaches that we see here in the top of this figure, where tribes, represented by the blue line, have no interaction with managers, policymakers, and researchers, who are represented by the orange line, or only contacted at the beginning or end of the decision-making process. In contrast, interweaving is the process of continuous engagement shown here, where tribes and related entities are engaged early and often, woven into the fabric of the decision-making conversation. Because this is not how things have worked in the past, accomplishing this is a long-term process that requires hard work, dedication, and repeated exposure to these concepts to normalize them. Encouraged by high interest and engagement. So across the first 2 days, we had over 130 unique individuals attend in person. And when I say unique, this means that we actually did have many folks who attended both days, but over the two days, there were 130 unique attendees in person. Across all 3 days, we had over 270 unique individuals attend virtually, for a total of over 350 attendees during the series. I checked yesterday, and as of then, the series recordings had already been viewed over 250 times on YouTube. So I just want to underscore that this is really great engagement for us for an event like this, and we're really heartened. It lets us know that we're meeting the mark as far as people are interested in. So then the other question is, who attended here? So critically, our target audience for this series, the primary target audience, were other state agency employees to help build capacity for folks who were interested in knowing more about the interweaving process, but maybe hadn't been exposed to it as much as some of us. And so, unsurprisingly, then state agency employees accounted for just over half of our attendees. So tribally affiliated attendees were our other primary audience. And while they only comprise 6% of our attendees, this is far higher engagement than we see from tribal groups at other events. And so this is another indication that this was meeting a need that was out there. And you can see here that nonprofits, consultants, and academics were our other most common attendees. So on day one, we set the stage for the event with an Interweaving 101 overview, including both a keynote and panel discussion on this topic of really building capacity at the ground level. Vice Chair Melissa Tayaba welcomed participants on behalf of the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and provided opening remarks. Council Chair Julie Lee, thank you, Chair Lee, provided a land acknowledgement and welcome on behalf of the council. So Brian Wallace, former tribal chairman of the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California and CEO of the Indigenous Future Society, provided a keynote presentation that grounded participants in the history of tribal stewardship in the Delta and its watershed. Followed was moderated by Derek Goodwin of the Indigenous Future Society and included Kimberly Stevenott of the Valley Miwok Tribe, Vice Chair Tayaba, Michelle Rivera of the California Indian Environmental Alliance, Nina Fontana of the Indigenous Future Society in UC Davis, and Anacita Agustinez of the California Department of Water Resources. For this day and across all 3 days, we really covered a lot of ground. So I'm really just going to give a very high-level overview of who presented and a few of the key takeaways. But if you're interested in learning more, I really do encourage you to visit the YouTube links that are included in your staff reports to hear more here. And across this panel and the following two panels, group felt was important, which was to have a mix of voices from tribal and tribal serving organizations, but also have direct representation from state agencies on each of the panels. And so that's a theme that you'll see represented. Day two focused specifically on tribal beneficial uses, which build on the beneficial uses identified by the Porter Cologne Water Quality Control Act. Councilmember Diane Burgess provided the welcome and land acknowledgement on behalf of the council. Thank you, Supervisor Burgess. The introduction talk by Adriana Renteria of the State Water Board outlined the history and current implementation of tribal beneficial, which are defined by the Water Board as uses of water that support the cultural, spiritual, ceremonial, or traditional rights or lifeways of California Native American tribes, including but not limited to navigation, ceremonies, or fishing, gathering, or consumption of natural aquatic resources, including fish, shellfish, vegetation, and materials. So the panel that followed focused on the practical aspects of operationalizing these tribal beneficial uses. It was moderated by Zach Chagone from the Shingle Springs and featured Crystal Moreno, also from Shingle Springs, Sherry Norris of the California Indian Environmental Alliance, John Rosenfield of San Francisco Baykeeper, and Adriana Renteria from the State Water Boards. Critically, the timing of this day ended up coinciding very well with an all-day formal workshop that the Water Board hosted to get feedback on tribal beneficial uses, which was held the following week on July 22nd. And so this event presented an opportunity to learn more about the process in advance of this larger, more formal process. And we closed out the series on day three with a panel focused on examples of successful co-governance and co-management, which featured Austin Stevenott of River Partners and the Valley Miwok Tribe, Buffy McQuillan of the Federated Indians of Grayton Rancheria, Shasta Gone of the Palo Band of Mission Indians, and Mike Escrow of the California Ocean Protection Council. Panelists highlighted examples of specific projects, general approaches, and what to avoid for successful collaboration. So as I've alluded to, summarizing all the great insights across the 3 days is a challenge, but I will try to share a few high-level takeaways here. And I think something that's really important to stress, given the motivation for the series, is that what we heard was generally consistent with the goals and recommendations of the Tribal and Environmental Justice Issue Paper. But the series provided new perspectives and stories, brought more voices into the conversation, and provided a free, open, and accessible public event to help build capacity. And I stress this last point because oftentimes these perspectives are heard as part of public comment or more formal settings where time is limited, the stakes are high, and there's not necessarily the time to build relationships, which we know is a really, really foundational aspect of all of this. And so this is something we were excited to be able to bring through this effort. So just briefly, I'll touch on some of, again, these high-level takeaways, which is that across all efforts, respect, reciprocity, and relationships are foundational. We heard time and time again that it's important to have worked with someone before you're in the position of giving public comment to them or their agency, and panelists really stress the importance of events like the Roundtable series. Critical in this is also understanding that perspectives from tribes and knowledge holders look different than perspectives from agencies and academia. In some cases, those of us who work in state service or other related groups might be faced with concepts or ways of approaching a problem that feel unfamiliar. And there was an encouragement to stick with that unfamiliarity and do your best to bridge, and in some cases, maybe slightly take off your professional hat to have a broader view of the concepts that are being brought. Given this, however, it is really important to note that capacity issues for tribes and tribal serving organizations are always going to be an issue. And persistence is a really important piece of this. As part of our planning process, one of the partners who was on the panel mentioned that we had initially connected because I think I sent him like 5 emails or something, and email 5 was the magic one where we finally were able to connect, and now we've been working together for years. So don't be discouraged if your initial outreach is not immediately responded to, just because there's only so many hours in the day for folks. Related to this as well, another theme we heard is that it can be very helpful to extend review timelines to help foster tribal participation. So I don't have time to get into the full details, of course, of FAIR and CARE principles here. So this is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data principles. And then its related topic of CARE, which is collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And so this goes a long way when we're talking about how to work with tribes and tribal serving organizations in the context of science to make sure that any information is handled respectfully and there's full transparency about how any shared information will be used down the line. This is a very important theme that came up across our days. I've already mentioned and touched on establishing common ground before consultation or other formal processes. Another important piece of this that can be a helpful bridge for overcoming some of the capacity issues is identifying pathways for compensating tribes for their work, which is something, thankfully, that we were able to do to help with planning this series. And then also showing up at tribal and related events is another great way for those of us who are working in state service to help show that this is something we have a genuine interest in. And then, again, just sort of closing out on the importance of these open spaces like the Roundtable series for learning. I briefly wanted to touch on, and we're coming up against time, so I want to be mindful of that, but I did just briefly want to touch on a number of the efforts currently being undertaken by staff at the council that do help us work towards both the precepts from the Tribal and Environmental Justice issue paper and what we heard from our panelists. We've heard a little bit today about the Delta Science Plan update in 2026, and the grand challenge number 4 is other ways of knowing, especially traditional knowledge, remains siloed from decision making, and there's some related activities to create inclusive decision making processes that weave diverse knowledge systems together to better manage the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So this is how these precepts are already being woven into the Delta Science Plan. Staff at the council has been working in collaboration with the Buena Vista Rancheria of Miwok Indians to help provide what we're calling a where do we begin document to just sort of help also codify some of this, some of the things that we heard at the series and in other places. This includes a series of interviews with members across tribes that were conducted in collaboration with the Buena Vista Rancheria. So this hopefully in the coming months will be something that will be available on our website. The Delta Research Awards which is our competitive funding solicitation. Features at least 2 projects, one of which is very firmly co-planned with Shingle Springs and other groups. And another of which, a couple weeks ago, I had the great opportunity to attend an all-day tribal-focused working session that is sort of bringing this into water management concepts in the Delta, led by researchers at UC Berkeley. We'll have a number of presentations as well as a formal welcome from Vice Chair Tayaba at the Bay Delta Science Conference coming up next month. And there was also extensive representation from folks at the 2024 Bay Delta Science Conference as well. So another way that we can help bridge this into the science world. And then our planning division has been working closely with Shingle Springs and others through their Science for Communities effort to really engage with tribal members on tribal land. So this is a photo here of Zach Chagone from the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians working with local youth and their parents at an event that was held back a couple months ago. So trying to approach this from a wide variety of perspectives. I've talked about, I think, most of these already, and Dr. Rachel Wigginton mentioned before as well, the TK agenda item that we have for our September 29th DPIIC meeting. So sort of see my presentation today as a preview of that, that will include many more voices, not just mine. And then we are scoping the potential of a traditional knowledge-focused council meeting in 2027. So please keep your ears out. You'll know as soon as we have that direction determined. And then just really stressing this investing in ongoing relationships being an important part of what we're doing as council staff. A lot of this work happens through relationships. The secret is that working through established relationships, which is often but not always your tribal liaison at a state agency. So obviously for us at the council, that's Jamari Robinson currently, but also working to build relationships outside of those formal pathways to the extent possible, and being thoughtful about the way that you are reaching out to tribes to request their participation, which is actually precisely why I don't have someone sitting next to me today, is because we already have asks out to them for the DPIIC meeting next month, and we're very acutely aware of not overburdening with asks. So yeah, with that, I will close. And this just 2 quick things, which is that Native American Day is coming up on Friday, September 25th. So this is a great way to start reaching out to tribes, start getting to know them, and attending. This happens right in front of the Capitol building. So great opportunity right in downtown Sacramento to meet a variety of tribes. And yeah, there's a ton of great displays, demonstrations, et cetera. And then the background image here is actually a preview of one of the projects that we'll be presenting at the DPIIC meeting next month, which is on a collaboration between DWR and Dr. Don Hankins from CDC and Austin Steve Knott from River Partners on a culturally informed burn out at Twitchell Island to look at managing vegetation out there. So with that, I know we're short on time, but I'm happy to answer any quick questions you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan, so much, and thanks for all the work that you did on the roundtable series and the whole team that worked on that. I was able to be present for all 3 of them, and I thought it was a fantastic amount of information. It was great to see so many of our state partners out there participating and learning from that. I know that when we first were drafting the white paper, a lot of this was just a vision. Again, it's great to see things like getting implemented and things happening from an initial planning. So thank you for all your work.
Yeah, thanks for your attendance, Chair.
Gail has a question first. Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo how remarkable this is. And I do think just also kind of our previous conversation and the harmful algae blooms, how we have really complicated and difficult conversations, I do think is a really important part of the board. I was talking to Jessica about this as well. And I think it's such an incredible opportunity where a lot of these conversations are adversarial, like at the beneficial uses, how we really think through how to respect the tribal lands and what more we can do in these conversations. This doesn't happen very often where we have these really complicated conversations, and I'm really excited for the council and obviously your really remarkable work in this regard to lean into those conversations and see if at least we can increase communication, especially when we're not having to make kind of big decisions, but finding ways. And I think the other piece for us, and I know this is a question just across the board in this state, but how we really leverage what we're doing and help educate other people. Like maybe we work with Audrey and we let legislators know, for example, and we take it to the water board. It would just be nice to really expand the reach of these conversations, because I do think this is sort of how we start like a really slow but steady change. So really amazing job, and I want to recognize that it's amazing because it's really challenging. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the opportunity to present to DPIIC is particularly exciting for this, and we're hoping that opens the door for, the range of DPIIC member agencies for this. So yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to, it's very fulfilling to see from the discussion that we've had to where we are now. Number one. Number two, thank the board members and the chair for participating and doing this. I think it's very good. And I really liked that chart that you talked about, the 4 models. Mm-hmm. We somehow, maybe sometimes people do that not knowing, but developing the 4 models, I'm sure has been very helpful.
Yeah, and it was,
I like that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was Dr. Shoko Brett who put that together based on some stuff.
Good.
So kudos to her.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Zingali.
Thank you. I want to echo all the praise for the outstanding process work, appreciation for the members who represented the council there. I also really appreciate the recognition that this isn't just about equity and inclusion and representation, which is important unto itself, but it's also because traditional knowledge is a source of best science. And I love that we're acknowledging that. And I'm wondering, over these past 3 years, the first listening session, this last one, which was robustly attended, really remarkable, what has emerged as an example of traditional knowledge that is best science that we are using, should be using, are planning to use, just to give it a little more texture? Dylan.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think the most concrete example that we have is this culturally informed burn going on at the subsidence, some of the subsidence reversal projects on Twitchell Island. And so I've been involved with those projects somewhat peripherally, but regularly since about 2013. And since I started working on those projects, a key question has been that you have these wetlands that are reversing subsidence, but they're not tidally connected. And so there's no mechanism, basically. The vegetation grows, it dies back. There's no way of that vegetation leaving the site. And so this has been a persistent scientific problem and a management problem. So sort of a dual problem, because that limits the ability of these wetlands to take up carbon, which is another one of their primary goals. And it actually creates a fire risk if it's not managed. And so this dual issue is one that for years, our partners from tribal serving organizations and knowledge holders have been saying, well, these wetlands were burned. This was a key part of managing these wetlands historically, and this is something that we should work to be getting back on the landscape. And you'll hear about this in more detail from Tyler Anthony from the Department of Water Resources and Don Hankins from CSU Chico. But essentially what they're seeing, and this is all very preliminary data, but the wetlands that this experiment was conducted on actually have instrumentation that allow researchers to track how much carbon is being taken up by the wetlands. And they're already seeing that because they were able to clear out all of this dense thatch dead material, and I'm really talking like when you look at the areas that weren't burnt, it's 8 feet of dead material in some cases. I mean, it's really striking, the visual difference. They're also just seeing the rates of carbon uptake, at least in the short term, are much more rapid, and it's so those wetlands, you know, you would think that the wetland maybe that had just been burned would still look a little rougher than the adjacent wetlands. It's completely the opposite. The wetlands that were burned are looking very healthy. The vegetation looks great, whereas the ones without that burn, still there's a lot of thatch that, again, in its current form, in an uncontrolled manner, does present fire risk, and it does compromise some of the carbon goals. So I hope that answers your question, council member. But yeah, I think that one it's really nice to see this connection of science, management, and traditional knowledge all coming together in such a robust way there.
It's a very compelling example. Thank you, Dylan.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah, I have to say, professionally and personally, this has been an experience that I will carry with me throughout the work that I ever do. I think it is a valuable conversation in general. And I want to thank the governor for elevating this as a priority. But I want to say that the Delta Stewardship Council has really, really been a great model for the state. And all of the humans that are involved in this have done this with sincerity and curiosity. And the folks from the tribes have also come to the table with sincerity and curiosity. I do have concerns that unless it is continued to be supported, it won't get to the place it needs to be, because we are only beginning. We are learning from each other. We are learning how to compare and contrast the things that are important to us as far as what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to find the right words. We're trying to find the right way to do it. And but again, I think this is an exercise that is important to do everywhere with all people. We all need to learn to be better at understanding each other and understanding each other's values and how we make decisions and the things that we have learned and experienced so that we can benefit from each other's experience. So I just appreciate it. And I did have a question. You showed the demographics and kind of who showed up on the overall. Was it different on the third day when it was all remote? Did it change?
It's a good question. We haven't done the breakdown for like day by day specifically. We just wanted to have a summary graphic, but that's something that we can look at and report back on. Yeah.
Because it was it was at the resource building, so it made it a little easier to show up in person possibly, but I just was kind of curious if we had a...
The first two events were hybrid, so they all
were hybrid,
accessible
that's right,
online.
that's right. Yeah. But I'm just curious if that if that had an effect on things. Thank you so much for all the work you do, Dylan. I think I said it on the way in. And this is kind of reflective of our staff. Really smart people that know how to talk and communicate, and that includes listening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic, wonderful. Okay, thanks, Dylan, appreciate it. All right, finally, that brings us to our conclusion. Preparation for the next... public comment. What am I thinking? I almost forgot him.
We have a public comment from Isabella Carvajal with Restore the Delta. Come on up.
Hi. Hello, council members. My name is Isabella. I just wanted to express my gratitude. It's a little short, actually. It's good. I wanted to express my gratitude for my job at Restore the Delta, for bringing me here, and for all of you guys who put in the work to care about and I'm a student at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I was born and raised in Stockton. The Delta was the first place I formed a relationship, I would say, to the land in general. But I'm here, I just wanted to be clear that I didn't attend this conference. I just thought my public comment would fit best under this agenda item. But you did kind of talk about it at the end. I wanted to highlight the work that Don Hankins is doing at Twitchell Island with his Indigenous fire management. And there's a lot I could say here, but just like to bring it back to a comment you said about how having this conference, the first one of its kind in 2023 is like having a conference on science in 2023. And I just want us to not forget that, the severity of that, because it's true. I mean, you were talking about, what is it, best science, and I think it is being acknowledged now that TEK is best science, and even with AB 2218 and the Indigenous Water Rights Bill, and how specifically it acknowledged the state-sanctioned actions and violence against Indigenous people and how that affects water rights today. Just along the same vein, like, as well as restoring these lands, we obviously need to restore the relationships between the people managing these lands. And if we're talking about stewardship, we need to acknowledge always the first stewards of the land. And so I just wanted to come here and express my support for AB 2218 and also specifically the work that Don Hankins is doing. I actually got to go on a field trip to that of Consumnes River Preserve, and that was my first time hearing about that project, and he actually like briefly mentioned that the Delta Stewardship Council was like acknowledging that work, and so that's why I wanted to give the public comment and just support that. I saw the work that's being done, and it's beautiful, and yeah, that's it.
Great, thanks for coming. We appreciate your comments. Anything else, Emma?
No further public comment, Madam Chair.
No public comment here. I just would like to invite the last speaker and any other students from UC Humboldt to give public comment here in Humboldt and save yourself a 6-hour drive sometime.
He needs some company. All right, well, thank you. So our last agenda item is our preparation for the next council meeting, which will take place on September 24th in West Sacramento. So please look for our posted meeting notices for further information or updates. Adjourned, and thanks for hanging with us. Sorry I failed in keeping us on time, but this was a great conversation. No, it was a wonderful conversation. I didn't find anywhere where I could even trim a minute, so it was all worth it.
So we have another event that needs to set up. So if you all could have networking, connect, just in the lobby downstairs would be amazing. Thank you so much all for being here today.